Yeah, these are for anybody who. No, I did like 6 of them.
But I mean, is it the same one?
Yeah.
Okay, we are good.
We are good. All right, and I threw my pencil on the floor.
Yeah.
You already have it, but.
Nice. And can we call the meeting to order, please?
Adequate notice of this meeting was given in accordance with Open Public Meetings Act 5, and meeting notice the official newspapers providing a copy of the agenda to the newspapers and posting a copy of the agenda at Borough Hall.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call, please?
Dougherty,
Here.
Here.
Howard,
Here.
Meyer,
Here.
Ready,
Here.
Sanko,
Here.
Rankin,
Here.
Here.
Here. Moving on to the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting on March 26, 2025. Are there any comments or corrections to the minutes as presented?
Sam, just my first name is spelled J-E-A and
Okay.
thanks. And I'll move the minutes.
Thank you, Jean. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, would you have a vote, please?
Dougherty,
Yes.
Herb,
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Meyer,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Sanko,
Yes.
Rankin,
Yes.
Stenbacher.
Yes.
Yes. Moving on to the public comment portion of this evening's meeting. This is the portion of the evening portion of the meeting where anyone here who would like to speak to the board on an item, on something not on this evening's agenda, this would be the time to do that. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the board regarding something not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting and move on to the public hearings, which are on the docket for this evening. First public hearing is Low, Block 12, Lot 3, 24 8th Street, the variance application. And please note that John Demblicker is stepping down. And we call them forward. What?
Yes, is the applicant here?
Is the applicant is here, and anyone, and do we have to swear them in and do all those good things?
Yes, we do.
All right.
So if the applicant could please present themselves.
Here.
Yes, that would be great. My office has reviewed the applicant's public notice and proof of service and has determined that the board has jurisdiction to hear this matter tonight for the public hearing. So the applicant is here tonight, as we are all aware. Could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before this board shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
And can you please state your name for the record?
Hello.
And you are the applicant in this matter, correct? Ms. Lowe, could you just give a brief overview of the application that you brought before this board and the relief that you're seeking?
And is this first time we're here hacking this without professionals of my own? Is this where I go into like the positive and negative things around municipal land use law? Or is this just like an initial brief overview?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you have any professionals with you this evening? Okay. That's going to be an issue. We have some questions that we need to ask of your architect that you hired with regard to the plans that you submitted. That were laid out in Ms. Green's planning review. It's my understanding that you can give as much testimony as a fact witness as to what you're looking for. But with regard to this particular questions that we have about the plans and any revisions that need to be made, we would have to take questions from your architect. And because they're not here this evening, you would have to bring them to the next meeting.
Okay, that would have been nice to know in advance. But we'll do what we have to do.
Okay, all right. If you just want to present like a brief overview of your application, we could try and get as much testimony as we can from you without having to go into, any of the technical aspects of your application. That would be appropriate at this time.
One procedural question. It's been a long time. Did the board ever deem this complete?
Yes, the
Yes.
application was deemed complete.
We
It
did.
was back in,
Okay.
Was it
Just-
January?
Remember? January, I don't, it
No, it
was,
has to be after my report was January 17th, so it might have been into that.
The January meeting.
Okay.
All right, so Ms. Lowe, do you just,
moment.
did we ever deem the applicant complete?
Yeah, there was-
You deemed it incomplete, then you did a revised submission. I went through the items, recommended a number of items were asking for waivers to grant waivers, and I outlined the other items where I said they had addressed those items. I just didn't know when the board ever met since then.
We have,
Let me speak. My recollection was the February meeting. It was deemed complete pending a couple revisions to the survey. Once submitted, and I was told at that point we would be ready to submit for the public hearing.
Mhm.
And that was submitted, and I was told it was good to go.
it's just, it's been a stretched out period, so we're just,
Get things in order for public hearing for February or March. Brings us to you.
Well, you know, unfortunately, just as I stated before, there are some questions that we would have for your architect, and because they're not present at this time, any questions that we would have, you would have to have them brought in, and we would have to swear them in as an expert witness.
Okay, so the questions on Darlene's document, I did prepare answers to.
Okay. But
we'll see how far we can
we
go
can
this
see,
evening.
we can see how far we'll get. You know, if there's any questions that need expert testimony, we would have to require that you bring your expert witness to come back and provide those answers, okay?
So just some context on the application. First of all, thank you, to the board and all of the professionals, and especially the borough clerk, Sam, for all the assistance as I made my way through this. I'm Paula Lowe, I'm the applicant, along with my husband Charles Lowe, who's home with the kids. So we moved here in 2010 and, Kingwood Avenue initially, decided that we wanted to make our lives here. Had our first son at Kingwood Avenue, moved to 8th Street, had our second son on 8th Street, literally home birth family. So we treasure our home on 8th Street. We adore it just as it is, but it's simply no longer workable for our modern life and 2 kids and people who work from home. I'm sure you've heard that theme a lot, especially since the pandemic. But we have a 3-bedroom home. My husband works from home full time, and one of the bedrooms is his office. I work from home 2 days a week, and we really need more space for our lives. Despite the fact that our neighbors raised 7 children in their 2-bedroom home, we really want our kids to have each have their own room. So I had to fight that one out with my husband. But so that's you know, the garage office is the main piece of work that we are seeking variances around for the setbacks. We are not seeking a height variance. We will be adjusting that in the construction plan that was discussed over email with the borough clerk. So that was removed from the variance request. The garage will also help us out. We currently have like a little shed installed sometime in like the 80s or 90s. That's going to give us adequate storage for our lives and my husband's craft wood collection. Constantly growing. And so the without this project, really our only other option is to move, and I just want to make that, you know, clear for the record, because this is what we've decided, and we've made a big financial investment to try to get the approval so that we can do this work, because we're committed to this community. And you know, you all know housing stock here is really limited, so the odds of finding something here are pretty slim. So thanks for listening to that context. The other variances we're requesting are around the setbacks for the mudroom addition on the side, as well as, you know, the impervious surface, because we're going to be making some additions in terms of like the paved driveway in the rear and the walkway in the front. So I have some comments about like the positive and negative criteria, so.
I wouldn't get into that yet
Okay.
until we can address, you know, the questions that we specifically have for the architect. I think that would be the most appropriate use of our time. But we can go through as much as we can, Ms. Green's planning review memo, and just give a breakdown of, you know, the exact relief that you're requiring, what the exact it's my understanding that in addition to the C variances that are proposed with the setbacks, there are a number of pre-existing nonconformities with the subject property. So if you just want to if we can go through that and address those.
Are you gonna have?
Want me to do that?
Charlie?
Oh, okay. So the board is aware there are 4 C variances, bulk variances that are required by the application. The first is for the rear yard setback. The western 1-story addition would have a 5-foot, 5.5-inch setback to the rear lot line that's not adjacent to the alley. The ordinance requires a 25-foot rear yard setback. The second variance is for an accessory structure side yard setback. The ordinance requires 5 feet, and they are proposing the accessory structure to be 2 feet, 1/4 inch from the eastern side lot line. Then there is a variance for the accessory structure rear yard setback. The ordinance requires 5 feet, and the applicant is proposing 1 foot 9 3/4 inches to the rear lot line. And then the fourth bulk variance is the impervious coverage. It's limited to 25% of the lot area. In this case, impervious coverage is limited to a little over 2,300 square feet. And the applicant is proposing 44%, over 3,100 square feet. The site is already pre-existing non-conforming today, so the site is already at 37%, so I just don't want anyone to think that it's conforming today. The real request that they're asking for is from 37% to 44% impervious coverage. And then, as was mentioned, there are some pre-existing non-conforming conditions on the site. The site is deficient in lot width, they only have 70 feet, but they're supposed to have 100. The minimum lot size is also deficient. There is so here we have a gross versus net difference because of the 8th Street right of way. So the net lot area is a little over 7,100 square feet. Lots are supposed to have 15,000 square feet in the R2 zone. There is a pre-existing non-conforming condition for the required side yard setback. Existing dwelling is 5.3 feet from the eastern lot line and a little over 7 feet from the western property line. There are no waivers required for the application. So the relief that's being sought is primarily related to 3 different yard setbacks and impervious coverage.
Thank you. Can you go a little bit into exactly what you are intending to use the carriage house for? Can you give a breakdown of, what each level is going to be, in addition to like how you're going to use that carriage house space as you're referring to?
So I know it says carriage house in the plans, but that was an oversight on my part, and that was like an architect term. We refer to it as a garage office because it will literally, there's no multiple levels, it's one level. It's a 1-car garage with a little office, like an L shape, off the back that will be for my husband. Putting him out there. He can work out there.
All right, so just to,
His home office, he's a software engineer.
Okay.
He's worked from home for 14 years.
so just to confirm, that's going to be used exclusively as a home office, that space, it's not gonna be used as an additional bedroom or anything like that?
We're not.
Do you want to clarify that?
My husband out.
What, that's just testimony, joking's a little awkward when you're testifying, you might want
Okay.
to stick with the use.
We just want to be clear on that because if it's proposed as an additional bedroom, there might be some implications with that with regards to required parking and things like that. So we just want to make it clear for the record, you're just proposing to use that as a home office space and garage.
Can I actually interrupt with a follow-up? The garage, I know you said your husband's got a growing wood collection. Is it actually gonna be used to store a car? Is it going to be used to store stuff?
We envision it just storing like our bicycles and yard equipment, lawnmower, scrap wood for house projects and stuff like that. we don't park in the rear, and actually there was a comment in here about the drawing being like. We made it feel like too many cars are parked that way. We don't even park in the rear and don't plan to, even with the work that we do. It's just. Like most folks, I believe, park on the street because it's easier access to your home. So the garage will, but we wanted to, really build it like a one-car garage for the project value, as opposed to making it an odd size that. Someone actually wanted to put a car.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So just to follow up on that, so a future owner could use it as a one-car garage. That's fine, right? Does it affect this
Theoretically,
application?
I'm not sure about the maneuverability of that. I'd actually
neither.
prefer to Bob on that, just because of the
Space,
space.
okay, but it doesn't affect what's before us right now.
Correct.
Thank you.
So at this time, if you, depending on how deep we go into it and how much, testimony that we'll need, we can start to go into the various groups that are required from you. If there's something that requires, an expert testimony, we'll have to circle back on that and have to follow up with an expert. So the variances that are being requested here are C variance, the C variance relief. And for that, you have to establish the positive and negative criteria of that. For many of these, for the existing, for the pre-existing non-conforming standards that we have here, that's obviously something that can be put towards the positive criteria. Can you speak a little bit as much as you can as to the positive criteria of each variance that's being sought?
Sure. Again, this is like based on my Google search of what demonstrates positive and negative criteria. So in terms of the uniqueness of the property, as you know, our property, like many, has a backyard and an alley. Almost every Frenchtown house on the numbered streets has a historic barn or allowed structure directly adjacent to the alley. And, I think these alleys are really special and charming. We assume our property at one point had like an original barn structure that was taken down at some point, and we now have a shed that I mentioned from like the 80s or 90s. So, I think that adding a more substantial garage or office brings our property back into that sort of alley-scape look. So I think the property is like beautiful for what we're proposing. And we worked really hard to design it. And under the size, as mentioned, like we didn't want a two-story structure, like a lot of properties have, because my husband he really likes the view of the sky, so we kept it to one story. But in terms of just the dimensions, we tried to keep it with the feel of the sizes of the structures that are in our alley and other alleys. One of the reasons we chose to do an accessory structure instead of add on to the back of our house is we have a very large, beautiful maple tree. I think you can see it in the renderings, but these can't really show how amazing this tree is. It shades the entire backyard. It's probably 150 years old. So we didn't want to take down that tree in order to add on to the house, to have an office structure, given what we had, without using our entire side yard up. Going with an accessory structure was really our best option. Speaking of the side yard, we think that's a unique characteristic, and not a lot of houses have that little side yard. Fun fact, it was deeded to the property like 3 owners ago from the yellow house that faces Harrison. At some point, this property acquired that. But it does give us that space to add on a little bit, and nothing overwhelming, but enough to just make our house more livable with a mudroom for all of the stuff the boys and sports have. And we don't have a single closet in the entire downstairs. I'm sure Frenchtown folks also face. Yes, and the mudroom also provides a broom closet for things like our vacuum, which just floats around the home. And that's nowhere to go. And then finally, the renovations to the rear of the house will make it possible to not have a bathroom door, like literally right where I cook. It will be tucked into like the proposed mini mudroom. So I don't, in terms of like internally beneficial uses, I don't think it qualifies there, other than I think it will look really nice. And our neighbors will probably appreciate it, once it's done, in terms of like adding to the look of the alley.
So it's your testimony that the proposed addition is in keeping with the neighborhood scheme? Okay. And that, you know, the strict adherence to the zoning standards with respect to the side yard, you noted that, if the addition were to be placed in the rear yard, it would be a substantial, difficulty for you just based on having to remove the existing maple tree in the rear yard? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, it would diminish the quality of the beauty of our home and of our property. I would also add, in terms of the side yard setback for the mudroom, that if we brought the mudroom addition closer to the street line, yeah, maybe we could not need a variance, but then we would have had to remove the bay window, which is like a really nice historic component of our home. I mean, I think they all got added to everyone's houses at some point in time. They weren't probably part of the original structure, but it's really charming, and I didn't want to lose the bay window. So we have to make a call there. You know, I also have some comments about the 25-foot rear yard, like the setback, because that's, I could share those. That would require us putting the garage in the middle of our backyard. And I'm not sure why that's ordinance, but
Hold on,
that's my understanding.
1 second.
No, accessory structures only have to be 5 feet to the rear yard.
So what
The
was,
principal, the house has to be 25.
okay, that's not what I.
Hold on, let's
That's
see.
my recollection.
This
So
one, the
the-
variance for rear yard setback.
That's for the house.
Okay,
And then if you go down to number 3, that we have a different setback for accessory structures. So the garage office would have to be 5 feet off the rear property line.
Oh, thanks.
And then the applicant's proposing 1 foot, not a
Right.
3/4 per year.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, got it.
gotcha. Great.
Yeah, so we have 2 different setbacks to make it more
Okay.
confusing.
Okay. Yeah, and the way we placed the garage office was keeping in line with like our existing shed pretty much in terms of like where it's placed. In terms of the side and rear setbacks, obviously it's not the same exact footprint, but roughly the same in terms of the distance from the property. I'm really glad that that's not the. Great. Yeah, I mean, I noticed that there's other stuff around negative criteria that I don't really think I can comment on, because I'm not like a law expert, but, I don't think this has a lot of negative impacts in terms of like. Don't know how it affects our master plan, but I think what we put together like is a really nice plan that fits the look and feel of our neighborhood.
Well, it was your previous testimony that, it's in keeping with the neighborhood scheme, so it won't. So your testimony is that it won't substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zoning plan and zoning ordinance. Correct?
Yes.
Exactly. Do you have any other questions?
Issues she ought to address that she has not addressed.
Let's see if we can get through the end of this letter.
Yeah.
So Ms. Flo, in my letter, I've noted some conditions. If the board, whether tonight or in a future hearing, were to grant you approval, there's some plan cleanup that's required. And I know your architect in his letter said, oh, we'll do it as the construction permits. But in the world of boards, we ultimately need a clean set for the board to sign and to have in file. And so if you've had a chance to read my letter, there's certain items that I've had in here that I've asked B conditions of any potential board approval. Do you have any objections to those items?
I read through, so I received this on the 21st. I read through. I don't have any objection to number 2, but there you said. Number 2 says. Taking to the applicant, it does not height of the third house with revised plans, and it says the applicant will revise the drawings to be submitted to the construction department for permits. And then you said, however, the submission of revised plans should be, so you're saying. You think like an A2 plan should be revised and submitted as a condition of approval?
Yes, so that way we have something in the board files. Because ultimately then construction needs something to compare the construction set to. Otherwise, they would look at what we have in our files currently, which says that the accessory structure is going to be higher than what the request is tonight. So typically what happens in the board process, whether it's a homeowner or a commercial application, they submit plans, and if there need to be amendments or modifications after the board approval, we get a revised set back. The board professionals verify meets all the conditions and doesn't trigger any variances, and then that set is the set that's signed off on and kept in the board file. And then when the permits come in, especially because we don't handle permits here in Frenchtown, they go elsewhere. Then the construction official has something to compare the construction permit set against that they know the board has approved and signed off on. And so that's the customary process that applicants usually go through. It's rare that a plan set doesn't need some sort of revisions.
Right.
Right.
So I was just going to add to that, at the end of the day, it's critical that an application is approved, that the borough has a copy of exactly what was approved. We can't have a copy of something that was originally submitted that we've now agreed to a bunch of changes to that aren't represented on the plan. We're required, I believe, by law to have a plan on file that's approved. Is that not true?
Typically, you sign off on a plan, and
Yeah.
certainly a plan you sign wants to reflect what it is you approved.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
So my request would be that, so every time we make a change to the plan. I mean, the architect has been doing these like at no charge because they're minor. I don't really know what it means to change the roof height and whether that's minor or not. Hopefully it is. But so far, every time we've made revisions twice, and then we have to have them signed, sealed, 17 copies delivered to the borough. So that costs about $130. So my request would be 1 copy for the records and digital, so that I don't need to spend $130 again, because we spent $7,000 on this variance, like in escrow. So it's like every time it's a hardship.
I don't think you need 17, but you could probably put 1.
And not simply digital.
Yeah, the board would require physical copies of plans that need to be signed. With some of these revisions that need to be made with respect to, the change in height. So that it doesn't reflect the excess of 15 feet. The calculation of the, what is it? The calculation for the lot. What is it? These are minor changes, like you said. I think it would be helpful for the board if they had these changes, and if we had the architect come to testify as to these plans. I think it would be helpful for the board. It's up for them to decide. That's why I made that statement in the beginning, that I think it would be helpful if the applicant brought their expert to testify as to the plans and the revisions that are being made. Like I said, it's the board's decision at the end of the day, but that would be my recommendation ultimately.
For fairness to the applicant, to Ms. Lowe, can we make sure that there is a definitive list of what the open items are and what needs to be done so that we don't go through a process of, I
There
didn't know
always
we
is,
needed
there
this.
always is.
Well, there was not clarity this time, right?
Well, to be fair, and no offense to Ms. Lowe, we've never had anyone show up without an architect with them for a plan, or without any professionals. This is a very unique situation. So Ms. Lowe has chosen to represent herself entirely and,
Proceed at her own
and
risk.
proceed at her own risk. And this is a very unusual, approach to this, which was your choice, which is fine.
The order in which all the comments from the different professionals were received, like, made it impossible to do one round of changes. And I'm not trying to criticize anyone, and I realize it's like separate professionals and separate buildings, but it's very siloed. And then I'm like, oh, I better get ready for this planning board meeting. I think all the changes are done, and I've done a round and done all the copies, and then there's more comments. So it's challenging. And yeah, I have professionals, maybe they would have thought things, and maybe we wouldn't have, and it would just be paying
Well,
people more money.
In all fairness to the board professionals, we can only, go off of the things the items that we received, and, as noted in the report, your planner did provide us a memo stating that they would make these changes. But, it was at the request that, they'd be of conditional approval. I think that, these changes are minor enough that they can be made in time before, the next
Oh, it's
board
pretty
meeting.
minor.
I think that it's reasonable to request those changes, yeah.
I guess
So-
my, oh, go ahead. Sorry, you were first.
I mean, in terms of roof height, I think. I think I'm capable of just fixing a slightly different number there, so for stuff like that, I think we could probably. Go on, and it does seem like there's the potential, since we're talking about like. Rear setbacks and things. That if we discuss as a board, there will be additional changes. Can we at least try and get through as much of the, whatever changes we might request?
Yes, agreed.
Because we have to minimize the.
It's. At the end of the day, we do need to have a plan that reflects it, but I agree with you that we should get through as much as possible.
Yeah.
To
So, like-
streamline the rest of the process as much as possible for you.
And Darlene asked about like any other, responses, so I did have some. So, yes, so the angle, the roof angle is less than 2 degrees. Just want to note that for the record, so.
But the overall height changes by how? What's the total overall height change?
I don't
I don't remember off the top of my head.
It's in the,
It says no more than 15
No more than
feet.
15,
Right,
right?
it has to go
But
down to
it's
15
not.
feet to avoid variance.
Right.
It was, I
Yeah.
think, 8.
18 and fraction. Yeah,
Then, okay, the mortgage survey question, so. We addressed this in a prior meeting on the record.
Is this
I'm
the
not-
one where your surveyor's passed away?
Well, practically.
Oh, okay.
Stanley Architects retired some years ago.
yes. Yeah, I thought.
And I
Okay.
tried,
Forget that comment. I removing that.
Yeah, we had, I think we had acquiesced to that earlier. Sorry about that.
we covered number 4.
Yes, we did. I would agree with that, and 5.
Number 6, I was confused about this one. So my understanding is that they're looking for a line to be added from the street line, which is the center of the street, measure back 10 feet. So did that 10 foot, 10 feet, 5 and 1/2 inches, that existing front yard setback line, which is measured from the street line, should be illustrated on the plan?
Correct. So we just have a number, but it's not dimensioned on the plan, which that should be a 1-minute fix.
Got it. And just to clarify, this doesn't impact, like, I mean, the front of the property, the setbacks. We don't have a variance for the front, right?
Correct. But this plan is also serving to memorialize the conditions of your property. So let's say one day you hit the lottery and decide to move to California. And so that way we have an accurate plan set that shows all of the dimensions of your property. So if the next homeowner comes in and wants to do something, or if they maybe are not the most upstanding citizen and does work on the weekend and then tries to claim, oh, this was already all here, we have an accurate depiction of your property showing all of the setbacks. So it's like a snapshot in time.
Okay, but I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, once all the work is done, don't we have to get another survey with all of the work completed? I thought I read that somewhere.
Oh, are you referring to maybe an as-built?
Yes,
I don't know what Frenchtown's requirement is.
I thought I read that somewhere, but I read a
That's
lot
not,
of
that's
stuff.
definitely not my, me.
I'm honestly not sure. Bob, do you have any insight on that?
Given that this is additions to the building and you're granting variances, construction code official or somebody might want a as-built document to verify that they showed a 4-foot addition that was 2 foot off the property line. They didn't put a 4.5-foot addition on. It's now 1.5 off.
But that'd be a single plan. That'd be a single.
That
plan.
would be an as-built survey would reflect
Yeah.
what actually got built, just to confirm.
But that would be from construction code officials.
Well, it could be a
Potentially.
condition of the board, but presumably a construction code official would look for something like that too.
So we would need a survey.
Typically, yes.
So could it be on the as-built survey? I'm just trying to work around like. What are
Right,
all the changes we're requesting and if it's doing that.
I understand you're trying to work around, I guess, these are sort of customary, these are customary items that are typically shown on plans, so. Is it the end of the world that's not shown on this plan? No. Is it customary that it's typically shown on this plan? Yes. I defer to the board. If the board is fine with it not being on this plan, but then someone's gotta make sure it's on the as-built. So it's just then remembering however many months or years down the road, that then the as-built needs to show this.
It is up to the board, but it's customary. It's what is done. When people submit plans, when they get them approved, they have this information on.
And
On the plan.
not to belabor the point, but again, I just really want to state that I think it's very important that the applicant have an expert that we can ask them questions about with regard to the plans that they've prepared. You know, I think we're in a unique situation here and I do appreciate you coming, but I think it would be very helpful for the board to have, you know, somebody who can provide expert testimony as to the plans that they've prepared so that the board and their professionals have the opportunity to ask them questions.
So for number 7, I didn't have any issue. Number 8, that comment was addressed. Number 9. We talked about the parking space
We did, yes, that's been covered.
and, you know, there will be no modification or enlargement.
Okay.
Number 11. No additions or renovations in the second floor. That was like old fantasy working.
So that based on the testimony on number 11, I think the notes on the plans need to be revised, because if there's no addition and there's no renovation, those notes are a little misleading.
Right, that makes sense.
Can you just tell me like where that was, which number was it, like A? Or, you know,
8.4,
no, I mean, on
was-
the plans.
it's sheet 8.4.
8.4.
A is an apple.
Which talks about the master suite renovation.
Yeah.
Have you concluded your testimony?
Unless there's any other questions or things you want me to address.
Well, since we have this advertised for public hearing, would we open it up for public comments this evening?
Yes, at this time, any member of the public can ask any questions as to Ms. Lowe's testimony.
Is there anyone who'd like to make any comments or questions? Could you stand and state your name and
Not
address?
Comments yet.
Not comments,
Just-
sorry,
just-
just questions. Sorry,
Questions?
I mistake.
Okay.
If you could state your name and your address for
Well,
the record.
no comments yet.
No comment.
Oh, it's just a comment.
Yeah.
All right, just
Yes, you may
questions.
sit
Sorry.
down. Okay.
Any questions?
So hearing none, at this time, the board can either require that the applicant come back to the next meeting with their expert, as was my recommendation, or they can proceed and close the public hearing portion. We would need a motion to close the public hearing portion if they decide to close the public hearing.
To clarify. If. I understand the choices, if I understand the choices before us correctly, we're either going to, continue this hearing.
Or accept the testimony that Ms. Lowe has given as final, without the
As
need
final,
for
without the-
further testimony from an expert architect to testify as to the plans that were submitted before the board, which would be my recommendation. This is a very unique situation that we're in right now.
It is. Thoughts?
It wasn't clear to me on another issue where we left things in terms of the revision of final plans. But that's it. Like, did we?
Well, we
Did we
haven't really
confirm
discussed, we haven't discussed her testimony at all, but
Okay.
we would do that. If we were to carry the public hearing, we would
Okay.
do that after we got testimony from her professional,
That's correct.
correct? So we wouldn't really be discussing the merits of the variances or the testimony before
Okay.
us this evening.
That's correct.
Okay,
If we were to proceed.
just being clear.
I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not sure the architect would necessarily give me any additional value in terms of reviewing the plan. I do think that it's important to have a completed plan submitted to the borough because we have a very limited staff.
Yeah.
And things can get missed weeks, months down the road. So I think that would be the only thing caveat I would say is you should have a plan that reflects the board's changes that's memorialized and kept for future use versus waiting for the construction office.
As a condition of
As a
approval.
condition, but otherwise, I don't think. For myself, just speaking for myself, I don't think having the architect come next month would do anything different for me on this application, but that's just
Yeah.
myself.
So follow-up question, is that because the answers are, there are numbers of feet, numbers of thing, and an architect isn't gonna add a value to that or more definition? What?
I don't think you were
What-
saying.
what-
No,
because
it's
there
not
was a
that.
definition,
Okay, so
because
what
it's
is the
straightforward.
issue?
What was your question? Is it about the architect?
Yeah,
coming back
about
here?
how there won't be additional value, we're not likely to.
Oh, I just don't, I think the applicant in answering the questions as to why they're seeking the relief for the C variance.
Got it.
What has been provided by the applicant to me was sufficient for why they're seeking the relief. That's why I'm saying I'm not sure the architect speaking to their plan will do anything more for me.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
I had the same sense, and that's what I wanted to ask our professionals. Is there anything that, you feel like you don't have a hasn't satisfactorily been addressed that the architect would need to address? Right, I understand it would be typical that they would address these things, but in this case.
Can I add to John's question is, because I have the same sense, but I guess what I'm also wondering for setting precedent is how would we document why have we chosen not in this case to bring back the professional?
Let me, I'll defer to our attorney about precedent, but in my experience, we don't typically, if we do something like that. Because every case is unique.
Right, but it tells a story.
It does, but we are, we're just, that's why I think the real issue is there, to Brad's point, is there anything that the architect would add that we need to know before we make any decision?
I would, for my letter, I would tell you that Ms. Lowe has answered my questions with enough information that I don't have any additional questions.
All right, and
I wouldn't have any additional questions at this time. I'm just saying as a matter of course.
typically,
When it comes,
Yes.
Certainly for C variance applications. Such as, the installation of an above ground pool
Right.
or a deck or something like that. Where the scope of the improvements aren't as large as something like this. Typically it's customary for the applicant to proceed on their own without the need for expert testimony. I think in this case, because there's been communication between the applicant's architect, and, as Ms. Green stated, there's sufficient testimony that has been presented where she doesn't have any additional questions, and the revisions can be made to the plans as a condition of approval. It's just as a matter of it being helpful to the board for the applicant's expert to provide testimony as to the plans that are being submitted in their capacity as an expert architect, in order to ask questions of that expert so
Right.
that they might be able to answer should any come up.
So in other words, if we had the architect come back in a month, we basically cover the same ground again, only this time it would be with the architect
Well,
sworn.
It would be with, so we've heard testimony as to the relief that's being sought and as to the positive and negative criteria of the relief that's being sought with respect to the variances that are being requested. It would be more so as informational to the board for them to hear from the perspective of an expert architect as to the plans that they have prepared, who might be able to provide some additional context as to the improvements that are being proposed. That's where I'm coming from.
Understood. Okay, thank you. I'm comfortable not having the architect come back.
Other board members? Ted?
This might be sort of a silly process question, and maybe you've said actually the answer, and if so, just blame it on the jet lag. But I think what I'm hearing is if we decide to go ahead and discuss this right now, we can't then hit a question. If we hit a question, we're like, oh, it would have been really good to have the architect to answer this. We can't just be like, all right, well, table it for the rest of this meeting and we'll just come back to it next month. We've got to like.
Once we close the public hearing, deliberate and have a motion to approve, there will be no further opportunities for the applicant's expert witness to present testimony as to the plans.
But I think Ted's question is, what if there is no motion to approve?
Well, because I do have a question
Well,
related.
there'll either be a motion to approve or deny.
Or continue.
That's the.
We can't take.
Or we would continue,
We
we
can
would
continue.
continue this public hearing without the need for further publication, public notice to next month's meeting, where the applicant would have the opportunity to present their expert witness to provide that testimony.
Oh,
So
so,
we can.
so we could, if we hit a place where we needed it,
Okay,
we could
yes.
just say, oh, then shouldn't we just,
What
what do
do
we lose?
Well, we have to decide, if we decide we want to hear from the architect, we need to continue the hearing. And then the applicant needs to come back with their architect, and we need to kind of cover a lot of the ground we've already covered.
Yeah, I confess that despite having sat here for many, many years, I'm also confused about process, which has me off balance a little bit. So,
We can either continue this public hearing and request that the applicant bring their expert witness to the next meeting, or we can proceed as we have been doing, close the public hearing and deliberate as to whether to approve or deny the application.
Right.
I think
New
part of the
variances.
confusion is the use of the word continue.
Correct.
So when we say continue the public hearing, that would be to continue it to our next
Another-
meeting.
That's right.
Not continue it this evening.
Right.
So if we decide that testimony has been completed,
That,
we cannot deliberate and then decide that, oh, no, never mind, we would also like to, we've changed our mind, we would like to continue the hearing to the next month. We need to
Right.
decide one way or the other now whether or not we've had enough
Right.
testimony to make a
that's
decision.
right, otherwise,
Did that clear it up at all?
No, I'm sorry.
We're still as
Let
mud.
me, yeah,
Yep.
let me try to ask the same question if I can try to
This is
simplify.
very
If we can begin, is this correct? We can begin the deliberation, right, to whether to approve or deny. And if we run into, as Ted points out, some question, it's like, whoops, we didn't realize it, but we
There's
really do
nothing
need the
on
architect.
deliberation. haven't
We
started
can't,
on it.
is that correct?
we
That
would have to have a motion to reopen the public hearing.
Okay,
Oh,
And is there some prohibitive thing that won't allow us to do so?
Unless there's a motion to approve or deny the application.
Correct. So if we run, again, correct this, so if we run into a, oh, we didn't realize, but we can't really make a decision, we're not comfortable deciding. We can make a motion to reopen the hearing and then
Okay.
and have that. So we can start, and if we run into a roadblock.
Yes.
Okay. good.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
just point of information, the reason for continuing it would be so the applicant doesn't need to renotice. Because they need to have obligation to provide public notice to people within a certain radius, et cetera. And that needs to be done a certain amount of time ahead of time, et cetera. So by-
Unless we announce that it's being continued
Yeah.
to the next meeting, then they don't have to read
They
it.
don't
Right.
they don't have to renotice,
So,
right? I'm just,
Okay.
Getting back to the discussion from our professionals. There is not an awareness before we begin of any open issues that we would need an architect to revise before beginning this discussion.
The only issue that I really had in my report was, and I'm not sure, it sounds like the board maybe dealt with this at a prior meeting. Was the issue of the, where the title line in the center versus the center line of the road is. And it
yeah,
really it doesn't change the type of variance relief they're requesting, but it might affect the magnitude. They're asking for impervious lot coverage based on where they're saying the right of way, the street line is.
Mhm.
But I'm just pointing out that and it's not uncommon in an older borough where you have title lines in the road that are not necessarily the center of the street. In this particular case, they're showing a title line in the road that's not graphically in the middle of the street, and the deed doesn't say that the title line is the center of the right of way. So I really kind of deferred to the board on this one, the report I wrote in January, as to how are you going to interpret this? Typically, a right of way is from the center, a street line is measured from the center of a right of way. In this particular case, it's 25 feet. They've shown that on the plan, but they're measuring it from the title line, not necessarily the center line. And I thought I heard Ms. Lowe say something that was being resolved or had been addressed or something. I'm not sure to what extent it was.
Yeah, are you clear?
Yes.
Okay, after we spoke in late January or early February, after our conversation, we resubmitted A2 addressing that concern. And that's
Well,
what,
then that was the
However,
document I never received.
However, the memo from Bob Clerico dated January 17th says the maximum impervious coverage is showing 44%, where 25% is required. And if the front line setback was changed, then those numbers would have changed, but the numbers are exactly the same on
they were all up.
on the planner's memo on April 21st. So let's look at A2.
How long the.
So it's actually 46.4.
The A2 I have is dated December 2nd, 24. And it's the revised one that I reviewed in my report of January 17th. It's a later document. Maybe there's a later document.
yeah, this one is February 10th, the one that we have
There's a
here.
later document. I never received. I was showing the center of a pavement and it's basically. So if the numbers they're quoting, if lot impervious coverage of setbacks and everything is based on this plan, then that's consistent with what I just.
This is what we asked them to do. And this is what they provided, but it was not captured in the memo. So the memo from Darlene under variances number 4 regarding impervious coverage, we're not looking at impervious coverage of 44%. We're looking at impervious coverage of 46.4%.
Yeah, you're right.
That's where the adjustment.
And that's for the adjustment.
So you're, right, so
So the answer to my concern is that it was.
It was addressed.
He just never saw it.
It was addressed.
but for purposes of Darlene's memo dated April 21st, 2025, the planning report. B4 will have to be adjusted.
Be corrected
Correct.
to
Okay,
46.4.
very good.
86 on this.
Would it also change The
Is that
existing
on-
impervious coverage. Wait, hold on, it's here. Yep, the existing is 38.7.
Okay.
It's the existing is 38.7. Which is still a
So before the 7%.
7.3% increase. So the percent increase is approximately the same. We didn't receive
Is
those
this
comments.
impervious on A2? I don't see them. Oh, here it is.
Nope.
Yeah. Just read my comment. Yeah, the percentages are not here.
Understood.
Okay.
So. What is the will of the board?
Do you need a motion?
I don't, is it
We haven't, well, we're still deliberating as to whether
to move forward?
we're going to.
No, it's not,
accept the
certainly
type
not
of-
on the variances, whether or not, do we need a motion to accept the
Close.
testimony or just
It
a,
would be a motion to close the public hearing.
Yeah.
You want their comments for.
but we didn't get
Yeah,
any
but
comments.
too, right?
And if I may add one more thing to my testimony based on the conversation around the professional architect. If this is helpful, we really drove every aspect of what we wanted. And the design, the decisions around, we want a garage office, we want it to be one level, we want it to be like this on the property, this is where we want our mudroom. This is like, just for your information, in terms of like the decision making around, what to do with our property in order to meet our needs. This is helpful information.
And all that being said, you're not a licensed architect or
You know,
a licensed professional.
I'm just because some of the conversation was around like the choices that were made around this design, and those were very much our choices, and we asked the architect what into the drawings with their professional knowledge of like what we wanted.
So in terms of what we were just saying, so we don't need a motion right now because you want to allow comments. It's after, and if we have additional questions for the applicant, we could ask her to come up,
We
right?
can ask questions after the public hearing is closed. We
Of
can ask of the applicant.
Well, we would have to reopen the public hearing.
No,
No.
we're not, I'm suggesting that we're not closing the public hearing. We're asking the applicant to sit down. We're looking to see if there's any
If there's any
comments.
comment.
And if a
Right.
comment comes up that we
Yes,
want to ask
then,
the
then
applicant
further
about, we could ask
questions
her
can
to
be
come
asked.
back
Yes,
up.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
And before I sit down, if I could just ask the board to confirm the plan updates that I heard were roof height. Add the line that from
Yes.
street line to that shows the setback of 10, from the street line 10 feet, 5.5 inches. That dimension needs to be on our survey. And then remove the wording about the master suite from A4.
You're missing comment number 7 from my letter.
Number 7.
So it'll be my letter. Comments 2. 6. 7. And 11.
Seven. I thought we said we filled that requirement, because we did. Revise the zoning calculations table.
Maybe it's already been done, but I don't have that document.
We would require it as a condition of approval.
Right, if it's already been done, right.
Okay. Seven, if it's not already done, and then. 11.
And we'll actually have. We'll make sure that for one of our professionals, I think normally the attorney reaches out to the applicant to make sure that you have a clear list of what is still required.
So I could
Do the
certainly.
conditions?
Oh,
Because,
yes,
because
absolutely.
those would be the conditions
Yes,
if it was approved.
Yeah.
So there would be a very clear list of the conditions of approval.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that
You
would
would
be memorialized in the
Yeah,
resolution.
resolution, right?
Yeah.
I think the resolution is already done. Okay, I'm assuming if I get a
The condition of, it's a document that we put together for all applications, which is the conditions of approval.
Oh, okay, I thought I heard you say the professional would send me an email.
No, this will be the conditions of approval, and it will be very clear and stated. Uh,
Sorry.
okay,
One more thing, sorry.
yes, no, go for it. This is a much more, because of the lack of professionals on the applicant side, this is a much more confusing process than normal. Go ahead.
And I wouldn't even know the process if.
I know, because you're relatively new, I know.
Yeah. So at this point, we still should not be like asking Holly any question, or we can't, can I ask her?
Yes,
question?
absolutely.
Yes.
You can.
Okay, so. I was just curious about the. See, it's hard, because I have questions. Both for the board about why things are the way they are and questions, so I will try to just this at Holly, which is,
You can ask both.
I can ask both?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can I- and that's not deliberation?
Fire away.
No,
Okay, great, see, trying, being too cautious here, so for the setbacks. It's unclear to me if these were put in the ordinance for aesthetic reasons or say like fire safety reasons. And also when they were, I could probably have looked this up, but when they were added and whether the building materials are still, because my understanding is like, if you have two buildings that are sort of close to each other along a property line, and one of them catches fire, there's concerns about the fire jumping from building to building. But modern building materials, you have dense glass and stuff like that. I don't know exactly when that was introduced. I don't know if this is like a technical thing or if it's just an aesthetic thing. And so that's the board part of the question, and the Holly part of the question would be like, how necessary is it for this to be right up against the sides like that? Because even if there aren't other buildings there currently, at some point in the future, someone will try and build really close to the property line. So
Why don't we go,
Can
for-
someone
why don't we
help
go
me?
for Holly question first? So,
I mean, our hope was to sort of imitate the setbacks that our existing shed has. And preserve as much of our backyard as possible, because it's a lot, for backyard sports, activities, fire pit, eating, hanging out, all of that. So our hope was just to maximize our backyard space and, you know, based on other structures along the alley, it also is in line with most of them, like they're placed, in terms of their setbacks, it's sort of all those constructions.
Yeah. Certainly.
I also don't think it looks that nice when they're pretty far into the property. To note, like, I was noticing how the duplexes that get built on the other end of the street, you know, the duplexes. Their garages are like set back into the property, and I don't know how many feet they look like.
I think that's if they can't rent to park. I think those are required parking spaces. So there's setbacks that there's room to actually put a vehicle.
And I was,
It just looks odd, and you know, they're kind of in there, and they have these really small yards, and then no one has ever parked in those spots. They don't park there. they
Yeah.
park in the street.
aesthetically, I agree with you, but I was more concerned about the accessory structure side yard setback. So not how far it is from the alley, but how far it is from the adjacent properties. And again, I don't know if I actually need to be concerned about this because I don't understand why this ordinance is the way it is.
Darlene, can you possibly speak to traditional side yard setbacks and why they exist in different zones and different municipalities?
Sure, so zoning, the concept of zoning was introduced to regulate land use across the nation, and a lot of it spawned from there were no regulations and it was the Wild West, and so there were light air sanitation issues in developed areas. So the concept of zoning was derived to bring order and regulation to development. And a lot of that spawned from adequate light, adequate air, adequate open space. And so towns in New Jersey it's a home rule state, so we get to choose our zones and our zoning standards. So we can select whether we want side yards to be 5 feet or 50 feet, it's up to us. I don't know, because I was not here when these numbers were established, but I would tell you, working for a lot of different towns, these accessory setbacks are actually pretty generous. I have towns actually with some larger accessory setbacks, but it makes sense for this type of zone in a borough to have these accessory setbacks.
Ours do not stand out from you as being
No.
exceptional in any way.
No, or overly burdensome.
We've heard the expression, pre-existing non-conforming, or existent non-conforming. And walking around, that area and other areas in Frenchtown, again, I'll ask the question, but it appears that we have many structures that are non-conforming. This would not be an exception,
I mean,
right? There is a lot of non-conformity, in what exists in Frenchtown.
my barn, which we just redid, is less than 5 feet from
There you go.
the neighbor's property, so like.
And I think part of zoning, particularly in a relatively tightly built area, is to, make sure, as you talk about light and circulation and whatnot, that your neighbor doesn't decide to put up a barn that runs the length of their property, that's an inch from your property, that's now 30 feet high. And so you're now looking at, a giant wall. So a lot of this has to do with trying to maintain a look, really, maintain a certain sense of community standard.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I always have to look to the planner to make sure I haven't overstepped what I'm saying there.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Lowe before we take comments from the audience? Any further comments? All right, so now we shall further the public hearing, and anyone who would like to make a comment on this application, this would be the time. Would anyone like to make a comment about this application?
Could Holly sit down?
She can or not, but it's to her choice. Please stand and state your name, sir, and your address.
Hi, my name is Mike Schiller. I'm at 706 Harrison Street. I have an alley that borders, or that is shared with several properties, of course, including the property in question tonight. My concern in general is about the request for the variation variances, setbacks, similar to what this discussion just was a few minutes ago. I think the setbacks as they exist now in the code are very reasonable. And I think they serve a purpose. You don't want buildings on top of each other. You don't want the neighborhood to change its feel. And I think it would compromise the neighborhood with these setback requests. The one in particular that I'm concerned with is minimum rear yard setback for the accessory structure of 1.81 feet where 5 feet is required. That is on the lane. That's what, 21, 22 inches? That's too close. And the current shed there is more like 4 feet. That's certainly not 5 feet. My garage across the way is 5 feet. And I think all the buildings are, there's none, 21 or 22 inches. So I'm particularly concerned about that. I think it compromises my ability to get in and out of my own garage on the other side, maneuvering the car. But in general, I have concerns about the setbacks being changed. I think the town should, yeah, I know there are setbacks that were changed over the years, but I don't think there's time to get into that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other comments on this application this evening from the public?
Am I allowed to?
You can respond.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
Hi.
before you do, I just want to make sure I know where we are. Darlene, can you help me? What variance is
What
that?
variance he was referring to?
Yeah.
Variance number 3.
B3 under on
E-
page,
E3.
Yeah.
page 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Yep. Okay,
Go ahead,
got it.
go ahead, Holly.
Thank you.
So 706 Harrison is the. You're standing in our yard facing our house,
Yeah,
through the next property over facing Harrison. We're moving the structure further away from you, so it'll be further than where the existing shed will be gone, and this will be there. So I don't
Yeah.
understand how it affects access to your.
Depending on where it is, but my concern is.
If you're gonna give more comments, I would just ask that you.
Yeah, but you have to stand and say, give your
You have
name
an
again.
Opportunity to respond if you wanna stand up. This is a quasi judicial board, so we have to follow procedure. So in following procedure, if you'd like to stand up and.
No, I
respond.
don't want to be asked.
Okay.
So I guess I would just wrap it up by saying that we're proposing is actually further from the garage, I believe there's 2 garages at 706 Harrison. And we're actually gonna be further from those garages in our existing. But I consider that.
Okay, may I,
Yes, please state your name again.
Mike Schiller, 706 Harrison.
Thank you.
My concern is still the same. Variances that get decreased from, or setbacks that get decreased from 5 feet to 1.9 feet is too drastic.
Thank you, sir. Are there any further comments from the public? Hearing none, we'll close this portion of the public.
So it's the board's decision that they're not going to require the applicant's expert witness to present testimony at the next meeting.
I said this portion of the public comments, I suppose. I suppose we could still reopen it, but I think it is the board's decision. We are not going to wait for professionals for the next meeting. Is this was sort of the sense that I had.
yeah, I'm fine with that.
Though I think I would want to re-ask John's question based on the comment that we just heard as to whether hearing from the professional will provide us with any unique information on this particular topic that's been raised.
On the question of the trimming. Well, we haven't even talked about impervious coverage yet,
Right.
which is actually one of the other variances that is
Yeah.
before us.
And so is there any value having the professional here to answer, to speak to this particular issue that was just raised?
So I would offer to the board that typically when a homeowner is appearing in one of my towns, they want relief either from a front or a rear yard. Typically, their professional comes with an exhibit to show the street and to say, yes, there are 10 homes on this street and 9 out of the 10 have the same, if not, a lesser yard. So it helps to demonstrate to the board that you're not approving something that's inconsistent with the
Right.
neighborhood.
Okay.
And that's typically done as an exhibit.
Yeah,
I think you could still go into deliberations, and if we, reach a point where we can't go any further, we can reopen the public hearing and request the professional be present.
All right.
If our deliberations hit a setback. No, thank you.
Yes.
I couldn't resist, I'm sorry.
Make sure you capture that
Yeah.
time in the minutes. So, should we deliberate the variances in order? Should we what would be your recommendation on this? Look at each,
We need a motion to close the public hearing.
which we could reopen at our option if we
Yeah.
chose to. Is there a motion to close the public hearing at this
I think
time?
the final, it's on what I just heard. I know we don't have an exhibit, but you can see pretty clearly on A2 on the area map, the existing structure along the alley. And demonstration of. We're quite close to the alley, and I recall going around, I know this is my testimony, but I did go around and looking at the table and trying to get that all around. It's good from the edge of the accessory structures to the start of the alley drive. And was in line with our neighbors. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing on this application.
I'll second.
Thank you. Need a roll call vote on that, please?
Doherty,
Yes.
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Meyer.
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Tomco.
Yes.
Branson.
Yes.
And Liquor.
Nope.
Sorry. Echo.
Yes. All right, we have several. Yes, please. We have several questions to address here. Almost 3 of the variances have to do with setbacks. So since that's the one we've been discussing mostly, perhaps we should discuss that one. I understand Ms. Lowe's testimony about the fact there are similar setbacks, but there are also homes in Frenchtown who actually straddle property lines, and I'm not sure we want to go forward and suggest that property should continue to be built that straddle property lines. So, just because there are other tight setbacks is not necessarily a gimme on that. And we have had at least one neighbor object to the idea of granting at least one of the setbacks. So, we have 3 different setbacks to consider here.
So if we, we could simply say, you have to meet the 5-foot requirement. That would effectively just shift everything about 3 feet
For number 3.
to the north,
Mhm.
right? That I know the applicant's testifying about losing space in the yard, but that would be a simple.
So typically with the C variance relief under C1, you have to meet the following requirements in that the board finds that the board would have to make a finding that the applicant would suffer an undue hardship if strict adherence to the ordinance standard was enforced, given the unique size, shape, and configuration of the lot, and the conditions of the property as it exists. We heard testimony from the applicant to that effect. They testified that the proposed improvements are in keeping with the general neighborhood scheme, and that the substantial, the undue hardship that they would be under in this instance is, loss of use and complete enjoyment of their backyard.
So they wouldn't lose the complete enjoyment.
They would lose 3 feet. Some of their testimony was, by putting this in the outbuilding instead of putting it on as an addition on the back of the house, they were saving the tree, which would not only, although Ms. Lowe testified that it improved their enjoyment of the yard, I think it also, large trees certainly enhance the neighborhood as a whole. So that is a good thing. That is certainly a plus. But I don't specifically recall hearing testimony that would suggest that perhaps shifting the garage office 3 feet over would be an undue hardship necessarily. That would not impinge greatly upon the backyard. So that is one thing we could consider.
Yeah.
Right, because I don't think in the testimony, at least from what I heard, was that the location was 100% around preservation of a historic tree in the backyard. But
Yeah, no, that was just
shifted
that
right
is,
on the
so
top.
putting it there instead of putting it as addition on the back, yeah. Which I thought was a very good point. But I don't remember hearing any testimony regarding particular positioning of this building being 1 foot. I'm trying to find it now. 1 foot 9 3/4 inches in the rear lot line. But perhaps a slight shift might,
Darlene or um,
okay.
our engineer,
Oh,
where is the where is the rear lot line? Is it in the middle of the alley? Like the
You've got
center?
issue then of the title line again. There's a title line in the alley. It looks graphically to be sort of in the middle of the alley, but the right of way associated with the alley, it's measured off of that title line. And the setback they're quoting is from that right of way line. So the ordinance standard would be 5 feet from that right of way line. They're saying it's 1 foot 9 and something feet. So if take a conversation, say it's 2 foot, it's about a 3 foot, be a 3 foot
3
shift
foot
to be
shift,
compliant.
Right,
And let me just point out, I wouldn't take a whole lot of deference to the buildings that are shown in the key map.
yeah,
They're just coming from some area or whatever.
yeah,
But the surveyor did locate the garage on the adjoining property. And it looks like they're proposing, the applicant is proposing, again, they're taking down a shed.
yeah,
And essentially the same approach setback into the ordinance, I think that's what they're proposing. And what they're proposing, at least graphically, looks to be similar to
yes, it
the
does,
garage that's on the adjoining property.
yeah,
Now, there's nothing dimensioned here, you know, if we're talking inches or whatever, fine, you can't say specifically that
yeah,
it's exactly the same, but at least it's represented on the survey as being similar.
that's a good point, yeah. I see
I don't
that.
know where this tree is, I don't know if moving this thing 3 feet would
No,
affect the tree or not.
Can I make a comment about the tree roots? Because I do not have it in my testimony, but it is important and I have it in my notes.
give us a few minutes. Can you hold your thoughts on tree roots?
Yeah.
Thank you. So. And we're back to arguing about property lines.
Mhm.
So. If the property line, if the rear property line. Did I hear you say it goes down the middle of the alley?
No, the title line.
The title line goes
Yeah,
down the
these,
middle of the alley.
these old lots of the road, the
Okay.
titles of the lots are in the road, and then there's an exception for the rights of the public in a public street like A.
Yes, yeah,
In the
yep.
case of an alley, that's a private alley, but there's reserved rights.
You said title line, I heard property line, and I'm just correcting myself. Thank you. Well. What about the other two setbacks? Let that one sit for a moment. What about the other two setbacks? Variance requests. So we've got the variance for accessory, number 2, variance for accessory structure, side yard setback. 2¼ inch from the eastern side lot. 5 feet of the western, should be noted. As opposed to a 5-foot setback, that's correct. On the side lot there, number 2,
Yes.
and it's 2 foot 1/4 inch.
Yeah. I think those are less,
So again, this is
those are okay,
the side yard.
yeah.
I would concur.
No one's
John.
objected to the side.
Seems like those are all right. It seems the issue in question is the rear yard.
This is the rear yard, okay.
Right.
Do we want to resolve this before we go on to impervious coverage, or I think it would be wise to actually discuss the impervious coverage
I agree.
Yeah.
first, all right. So. Thoughts on impervious coverage?
Well, I don't like to see impervious coverage going up because that increases stormwater runoff, which we're trying to mitigate. And Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's nothing in the plans about mitigating stormwater on site. Not that there need to be, but,
Now, and the other, you're dealing with, well, one of the other pre-existing conditions, you're dealing with an undersized lot.
Yeah,
So the percentages are high, but if you looked at the actual
square
square
footage
footage,
is not that
it's,
much.
it's, well, it's a variance, so you don't want to say it's insignificant, but in terms of magnitude, these are, you're dealing with small numbers,
Yeah,
like large percentages, so.
In terms of what is regulatorily approved as impervious and what actually is impervious aren't necessarily the same things. And there are a lot of new building materials that are solid and stable. You can park little tiny cars or big cars on that will allow drainage, stormwater drainage, whether or
Well, I
not,
think- I'll
again.
defer to Darlene, but I think
Yeah.
from a zoning perspective, even a porous pavement would
That's
be
right.
counted as impervious
Right.
coverage, yeah.
Correct. Well, I'm talking about the difference between, you know, the designation and the actual science of whether something
Yeah.
is pervious or
Yeah,
impervious.
If stormwater runoff, even to the magnitude you're talking about is a concern, you could certainly have them in the parking area they're doing, do something in the way of an impervious pavement.
Right. Yeah.
Or pervious pavement.
Pervious, right, right. That's what I was
Yeah,
saying.
I think, you know,
That'd be like a mitigation factor.
Right.
I think we have to accept that if you're gonna do something like this, there's gonna be a change in impervious area and ask the applicant to try to
Mhm.
mitigate that with some material, an appropriate material, but otherwise, you know, accept it because it's the actual square footage is small.
So the smaller, but. I mean, stormwater runoff doesn't care about square footage, right?
Right.
It is sort of a percentage. I think percentage makes sense as a way to think about it.
right.
It also just eyeballing, I mean, the paved walkway that's added looks like it has a similar, maybe a little smaller area to the new accessory structure. We could ask for that to be done previously. And if we are going to make any mitigations a requirement, it might be nice to not just say, well, you gotta use pervious pavers, since I think the stormwater management training we had to take talked about other things like rain gardens. So if we could just
Yeah,
be general, if we end up going that.
yeah, some
Well,
some
To
mitigation.
be clear, the proposed improvements, they don't meet the threshold of
Right.
requiring any stormwater management.
Right.
Features, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, there's also that factor that plays into effect. They don't necessarily have to. They're not
Yeah.
required under the NJDEP regulations because they don't meet the threshold of what the,
But
What
we
you-
could still choose to be more strict than the NJDEP.
I mean, the board could request a condition of approval that the applicant revise the plans to include stormwater management features to the satisfaction of the board professionals. You know,
I would venture a guess that aside from doing porous pavement, the lot's so small, especially
Yeah.
talking trees, and you're not, there's not gonna be any room really to do much of anything.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Yeah, I don't think we need to ask for stormwater mitigation. It's gotta keep it in perspective here. So I think accepting the additional impervious area is okay.
Without asking for any
Mitigation.
change, for example, to the paved walkway.
Okay, when you
Yeah,
say
'cause we're-
change, do you mean like the area of it? Or
Well, you know,
what?
I would
I'm-
defer to our engineer, but you know, just to be clear, the scope of this proposed improvement wouldn't
Right.
necessarily require, you know, under the law and the regulations, any additional stormwater management.
I understand that, but if you're putting in a new paved walkway, and instead of putting in a new paved walkway, you put in a new gravel walkway, it would not be necessarily impervious, and
We've done that in the past.
we have done that in
We've
the
done
past,
mitigation in the
and,
past.
and we were fairly, this board relatively recently was fairly strict in the interpretation of impervious coverage on a property 2 houses away from this.
I was gonna say, I thought it
Um,
was on 8th Street, yeah.
We were, when they put in their new properties up on Milford and 8th.
Yeah,
Ms.
Um,
Lowe, would you agree to a condition of approval to have gravel walkway as opposed to a paved walkway as a condition of approval?
First, I just want to say that we didn't envision concrete for this pathway, but we were told that anything other than grass or dirt is considered impervious, like I wasn't aware that you could.
No, that's
put
not,
another material and say that that's what we're planning on.
that's not what they're saying. But from a zoning perspective, you put a sidewalk in, it's part of your impervious coverage. What they're talking about is using a material.
Yes.
If the premise of having a limit on impervious coverage, if stormwater runoff that's certainly one of them. If that's the concern, you're asking for a variance from going over the limit on impervious coverage. By definition, the sidewalk is impervious area. They're suggesting use of a different kind of material that wouldn't produce as much runoff.
Yes, so
on
we
that
were
material.
always envisioning like stone with, with little openings between the stone. that
Like a
are
flagstone,
glossy
like a
or-
flagstone sidewalk.
With
Yeah,
gravel,
flags.
right, permeable materials.
That's what we envisioned, or like nice round gravel that you could walk barefoot on, but we weren't envisioning like solid slabs of.
So is this, instead of specifying gravel, we could talk about permeable material.
Permeable material, there's
Right.
course, yeah, there's.
Permeable
there's concrete,
materials
there's
such-
suggesting
Such
that-
as,
Right, right.
Permeable pavers, the
Yeah.
gravel.
kernel pavers, gravel,
Yeah.
etc.
Right.
You would be agreeable to that, which would somewhat help to balance a little bit from a runoff point of view,
Yes.
the increase in impermeable coverage.
Yeah.
So we were very strict about this in our interpretation of the property, just a few,
Well, by definition, it's still an increase in impervious coverage.
Right, but.
it is,
But
I
that's just the
understand that.
material.
But in terms of the water,
understand
it
that.
will be permeating.
Yeah.
More so certainly than would be from paved,
Yes.
traditional paved. Any other thoughts on the impermeable coverage?
Seems like a reasonable way forward on that one.
All right.
It's a small lot.
Mhm.
All right, so going back then to the number 3,
Right.
the variance, the carriage house, 1 foot 9 3/4 inch setback. Ms. Lowe wanted to comment on tree roots. I think this would be an appropriate time for her to comment on that.
Yeah, so when we explored improvements to our property, we had a tree expert come who informed us basically to be extremely careful about disturbing the root system of the tree. And that it's so large and extends so far towards, like, the root system is ginormous, and any damage that we do to it compromises the tree. So part of our thinking was also like, keep the accessory structure as far from the base of the tree as possible. I also just want to point out that the 1 foot 9 3/4 inches is from the property line, which is not the line of the alley. We're not saying
Correct.
it,
We
here's
understand
the
that.
dirt alley, and then, but I hope that my neighbor, for instance, understands that the line of our property is set back quite a bit from the alley line, and then we're talking about almost.
We're looking at the plan that we have in front of us, it'd be your testimony that the setback of the proposed structure would be further from the center line of the alley than your current shed. What I'm seeing.
Yeah,
I would venture a guess to be similar. But just graphically looking at it, if you look at the existing.
You're talking, you're talking that would be inches.
I'm
what
just
I'm
saying,
looking at, yeah.
graphically, it looks sort of similar.
Who was, do you recall the name of the arborist that you had come out to look at your tree? What company it was?
No, but I could find,
Beg your pardon?
no, but I could find it, I'd have to check my record.
It actually does not show well here on this plan at all. Is the tree along the eastern border of your property?
I think some of the renderings from the architect, like the 3D.
No, I'm looking at the aerial.
The picture.
Looking at the aerial, and it shows it pretty close to the property line. Is it on the property line?
No, it's, so if you look at the survey, H2, sorry, can I approach it?
Yeah, please. Because this shows it way over here.
Right here. This is like a set of stairs, okay, that was originally there on our deck when we bought the house. We moved these stairs because the tree is basically right here. And the trunk, so I mean, it is close, but it's not right on this property line, it's right here, and the trunk was growing into the stairs, and we moved the stairs. And, it's a big trunk, so when you come out our back door onto the deck, the trunk is to the right of the deck.
So it's here.
Yeah, and it is, quite
it's-
wide and.
So do I have that? Do I have that placed approximately right, Holly? Well, it's hard to draw it on it.
Yeah,
Okay,
and the,
so it's here.
you know, the
Yeah, yeah.
canopy is,
You have a full color
Yeah.
area?
You pass that around. All right, so it is in fact on the,
yeah, and the arborist told us, you know, that the root system is like, typically it's like the size of the canopy, and the canopy is quite big, and so the root system is kind of more. roughly.
Would you agree, for a condition of approval to have a written correspondence from a licensed arborist, if that's even a thing, or a licensed?
there are licensed
A
arborists. yeah.
licensed arborist as to, you know, the conditions of the existing tree and
The risks.
the risks that it imposes. Would you agree to a condition of that?
Sure.
If they already came out and looked at it, it shouldn't be a big ask.
Yeah, I mean, it was a couple of years ago at this point when we initially started like thinking about what to do to our house to get it to stay there, so. It was a long time ago. I mean, it might have been more than 2 years ago, to be honest.
Well, I mean,
I don't know. If it would, might need to like redo it and then charge us.
well, I mean, I'm just looking at it that with still being a tree in your backyard, it is about as far away as this new structure could possibly be and still be in your backyard. It couldn't possibly be any further back away from where the new structure and still be in your backyard.
But even aside from the tree roots and stuff like that, I mean, this is in line with the neighbor's existing structure. This is in line with the current structure. Do we, I guess from my perspective, it feels like we could just, I'm okay with this variance. I don't really see why.
Because it's in line with the neighbor's structure and in line with the current structure.
Yeah,
So it
it
is,
doesn't seem.
it is, even though it's a new structure, it is continuing a. And I know this doesn't make any sense what I'm about to say, so don't give me a dirty look, Darlene, but it's continuing a pre-existing condition. It's just sliding it to.
We don't know if the shed was installed legally.
I don't know if the neighbor's garage was installed legally. Well, yeah.
Right.
So that's a very good point.
And the one just on the 25 Street.
Yeah.
It's saying, I also, I just, looking at the thing, it's basically half of the structures on this.
But-
So,
But yes, and as I previously noted, I can take you to several properties in Frenchtown whose property, full buildings are actually partially on the neighbor's
Yeah.
property, so. So we can't really fall on that, I don't think quite so much.
Well, yeah, I just don't see why the 3 feet is gonna impinge the tree.
Yeah.
significantly.
significantly, given out where it's located.
Just to put it into perspective, and again, not to offer testimony, just graphically, where they're describing the tree is located is about 70 feet. Well, from the closest point on this proposed structure, it's about 50 plus feet
Yeah,
from where they're saying the tree is. And if you look at the renderings on the first sheet of the architectural plans, they show the tree right up against the house, and
Mhm.
this accessory building is about as far away from the house as you're gonna get.
right.
Yeah, honestly, if you look at it this way, where they're planning on putting the stoop in the mudroom is a whole lot closer to this maple tree
Right.
than
Yeah.
moving the shed 3 feet closer to the maple
Yeah.
tree.
But her testimony was that they couldn't expand the house without affecting the tree.
Which is
fine.
true,
Yeah.
absolutely true, absolutely true.
Right.
Yeah.
Urban tree, the work that we're doing on the rear.
Right,
That's why
Okay.
we were sticking with the existing footprint.
But the mudroom is not inside the existing footprint, correct? The mudroom isn't, you're expanding the existing footprint for the mudroom. I'm sorry?
We're enclosing, yeah.
The porch, okay.
That's off the back of the house.
And it's
Oh,
existing.
you're talking about the
They're
side,
close.
she's talking about the rear.
I'm talking about the side. The side is where the mudroom's going, correct?
Yes.
The side is where the mudroom's going, you're building, and that's expanding the side of the building right next to your maple tree, correct? It's within probably 15 feet of the maple tree.
These are questions that would be extremely
Oh,
pertinent
well-
for an applicant's expert witness to testify there.
So noted, so noted. I'm simply, if we're talking about not moving a building 3 feet closer, the mudroom is very close to, and
Goals.
understood,
Minimal impact.
understood. I'm all for trees, I understand. So. We have 4 variances.
Well, it sounds like we're okay with one, 2, and 4 with some stormwater mitigation on the
Yeah.
walkway. Right? Does that sound like?
And the stormwater mitigation that we're talking about is really just based on
Gravel.
making sure that
Yeah.
the walkway
Right.
is a gravel, some sort of permeable surface
Right.
as opposed to
Right,
paved.
so that's what I keep hearing.
Yeah,
Yes. Which leaves us with the stickler of the,
Which I do have to say, and I really don't like the idea of asking them to come back and pay their professional, but our attorney is sitting on my shoulder, most recently with the comment about some of these questions where I'm worried that we're all playing amateur engineers.
I agree.
You are an engineer.
Well, no, it's not.
I
I'm
got
I'm a scientist.
Okay.
I work for, I think we're okay. I don't think that the architect would, again, I think we'd be covering the same ground again. Have to come to the same decisions or choices.
well, I think at
Well,
this,
I guess my question would be, so on number 3, the applicant's proposing 1'9" 3/4 inches.
Right,
We had a nearby resident ask that 5 feet be respected.
maintained, yeah.
So can we would the applicant be willing to just say, take the 5 feet setback? And if not, then I think that sounds like where we want more deliberation around.
Right.
But if the applicant said, yeah, I'll push back, I think that ends this, but I don't.
Yeah,
I think that's-
That's kind of, I think where we're at this point.
I think you're right.
In terms of Gene's question, though, are we confident that that is doable in terms of building and design and?
Yeah, and that we don't know probably about.
Right.
I don't know.
At which point we would be told that if we had professionals here,
Yeah.
they could answer these questions. For
But
the,
also, if it turns out, like if we say it's gotta move and then she goes and talks to her architect and they say, well, actually, that's not gonna be possible,
right.
then she would just come back to us. Like,
That's a
Well,
good
no,
point, Tim,
well,
because if she should say, if we say conditional that you stick with 5 feet, she talks to her architect builder and they say, hey, that's not really a problem, it's fine, then we're theoretically done, right?
Well,
It would be a condition of approval that
Right.
the applicant revise their plans
Yes.
to reflect
Yeah,
a setback of 5 feet, and therefore it wouldn't necessitate
Right.
the variance that's being requested,
Right.
so. You know, if that were the case, then it would be a motion to approve for the variances that are listed there accepting.
yes, that's what I'm.
so we would accept variance 1, 2, and 4
Right.
as listed and require that the building be set back 5 feet,
Right.
which would negate the necessity for variance number 3.
Right.
Now, the question being, if we approve it with those conditions and Ms. Lowe goes to her architect and he says,
Work.
can't do it, won't work for whatever reason. And I don't know why. What is the process moving forward
Then
there?
she would be right back here before the board requesting variance relief as to the.
and
Next,
she
you have
would,
to renotice.
she did notice,
Can we maybe ask the applicant her thoughts as to?
Yeah.
I think that Yeah,
First,
okay.
All right, you guys ready? All right,
We're ready.
Ms. Lowe, how do you feel about a 5-foot setback?
I mean, I continue to feel that the existing like 5-foot setback in the regulation was not fitting with the look and feel of our alleys. And most of the structures on our alley are not 5 feet back. They are closer to the 5 feet back from their property line, right? We're not talking about the edge of the alley, the property line, which is further in. So it's gonna look very far into the property, and I don't think that would look nice. And I'm wondering if we can meet in the middle. Does it have to be 5 feet or 1 9 3/4, or could it be like 2.5 feet?
Okay.
Yeah, because, and it, I honestly feel that it's not a nice look for our alleys, but, and in addition to my other concern.
So,
I'm curious if there's like a meet in the middle.
okay.
Possible.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the testimony that you're giving is that you would like, you are requesting the variance on the basis that the proposed location of the structure is in keeping with the neighborhood scheme. Thus you have satisfied part of the criteria that's required for the relief that's necessary. And the board can make a finding
Or a
as to that, yes, as to the C variance relief.
Could we also request, because a visual, right? I think architects, there's a lot of software that can mock up and we can actually, instead of us all trying to guess what that might look like and how much that might impinge on the neighbors, we can actually see what that looks like. That shouldn't be that difficult to do for.
We'd have to reopen the public
We'd have to
hearing.
reopen the
Yeah.
public hearing and continue it.
Right,
Or carry out tonight.
Yeah.
yeah,
And that would be, you're asking for like a 3D rendering?
yeah, something like that, or enough photographic or visual evidence that we could,
sure,
hey, we
That's-
get it or we don't get it.
It's expensive.
That's
it's a burden.
yeah.
That's expensive, so that's a burden on the applicant.
Well, again, I assume if we're talking about a professional architect, they use software these
Sure.
days. And doing that stuff may take 15-20 minutes. But, you know, we're not.
You have
talking
to
about-
have the applicant's expert to come and testify as to
Okay.
the.
Yeah, but, all right, we would be back there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not.
Okay, no, I appreciate it.
You know, for the sake of the board,
May I make a request?
you're not the applicant, so.
Not right now, sir. Ted,
I guess another just like, I'm new here question. How do we decide on sort of aesthetic things like this? Is it just like, we look at the master plan, we do our best?
usually we would have more documentation from the professionals that were supplied by the applicants. We would often have visuals that showed us what it would look like. You know, we've had these before where we've had some really interesting questions where, for example, are you testifying that you're gonna build up the front yard 8 feet? You know, we've actually had that with things. So often an application such as this would provide us with more visuals of what that might look like. They're usually generated by the architect.
But when it comes down to like, does it look right to have 2.5 feet versus 5 feet? Like, it is just a subjective, do I feel like this fits with the
Well,
master plan?
it's what the
Or not
applicant is requesting.
incompatible?
It's what the applicant is requesting. If they're requesting the variance for that, then the board has to consider.
Right.
Unless there's a condition of approval that's consented that the applicant is going to revise their plans. But this is what's before the board is
Yeah,
the
sorry,
variance.
I think that wasn't. My
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, but the
Ted's
Ted's question, it's a judgment call, right? We will look at it and say, yeah, that looks okay to us, consistent with, or no, it doesn't.
But I think but you have to look at it with the glasses on, that we have a code and we have
Right.
standards. So the standard is 5 feet. If you had an applicant coming to you asking for 4 feet, that's, you know, a certain percent of deficiency. You have an applicant before you tonight asking for 1 feet, 9 some odd inches. So just while you have the idea of, you know, is this okay? Look at it through the lens of, these are our standards. Every year we have a board report where we say, are there things because of board applications that have come to our knowledge that need to be amended? And if we find things that should be tweaked, we fix the ordinance. So the ordinance is also a living document. So I don't want you to think, oh, well, this was probably done in 1970 and no one's ever thought about it since then. It might have been done in 1970, but every year we look back at the code and say, what needs to be amended based on the applications we've received?
Also, the granting of a waiver is indeed why we have a board. Otherwise, it would be, the law is 5 feet, period.
Right.
There is no judgment, there is no exception, it's 5 feet, period. But we are here because someone's asked for an exception. And so.
Yeah,
you
because
know,
that's what a variance is. It's an exception. They're looking for an exception to the rule every time.
So
So-
it seems to me we made good progress 3 out of 4,
Yeah,
but this number 3 really has
We're-
stopped us
yeah.
because the applicant feels very strongly about the waiver and wants the variance.
Well,
There's not enough, I don't know, for myself, it sounds like, you know, based upon the neighbor concern, is that maybe we need a little more time to dive into this one, we need to get more information.
well, and like Darlene said, that typically if the professional was here, they might show us,
An exhibit,
yes, in relationship to the rest of the
Mhm.
neighborhood scheme.
or sometimes applicants will do an Oprah request to
Yeah.
see, oh, were the 6 accessory structures on this block, were there zoning permits? You know, are they all legally there? The Oprah request may come back up, no, there's nothing, because they were all built in 1890.
Right.
But then that would give us some context to know 10 out of the 10 accessory structures are pre-1900, of course, there's no zoning permits. So we're missing a little bit of that context, or as Brandy was saying, the documentation.
So you're. Yes, Ms. Lowe.
I just wanted to offer a resource, Google Maps, you know, aerial view by,
Holly, we don't have testimony in front of us. We can't all go to Google Maps. That's something that would have had to be provided to us.
and
So that's. Yeah, but we're not all gonna sit up here and do a Google Map search. That's,
offering a resource that is freely available to see the condition of the alley and all of the other.
Right, but as the applicant, it's your obligation to present documentation to the board.
so. Comments from the board and professionals suggesting that we are going to. Reopen the public
Yes, we need a
hearing.
Motion to reopen the.
So we
public
would make a motion to reopen the public hearing, and then we would carry the application
Yes,
to our next meeting
without the need for further notice.
without the need for further notice, but we'd also give very clear direction to the applicant that we would strongly recommend that she show up with her architect.
Yes.
And that,
And Randy, we would be carrying forward only number 3 for that discussion.
Yeah, we can do approval on 1, 3, and 4 waivers, is that?
No.
We
No.
can't.
no,
Need to
Okay.
take this all in one go.
no.
Okay,
But I think, as the mayor suggested, our sticking point is
Yeah.
number 3. And we're gonna need further clarification, further documentation, further visual information for us to be able to make a informed decision on that.
What it boils down to is the applicant needs to present an argument as to why complying with the 5-foot setback is an undue burden.
Yes.
And part of that would be an exhibit showing along that alley,
Right.
there's these structures, that this one's 4 feet, this one's 8 foot, this one's, whatever.
Mhm.
And to their point, there's an existing structure on this property that
Right.
they're removing. What's the setback of that structure?
Right, and it's not compromising turning radius and other things. that are
Right.
And radiance of
Yeah.
the neighbors, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Um,
To address the neighbor's concern.
Yeah, there's data source an architect could use, near maps or something, aerial that,
All right.
Just something that's.
something that, more factual than just everybody's presumption of what they think is out there.
so is that how the board would like to proceed?
Yeah.
All right.
Motion to reopen the public hearing.
Motion to reopen.
I'll make
public
a
hearing?
motion.
And seconded by Martin,
We need a
roll call, please.
Dottie,
Yes.
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Yes.
Betty,
Yes.
Yes.
Rankin,
Yes.
Eckler.
Yes.
Because of the timing of this matter, the board, from the date of, it's been deemed complete, the board has 120 days to take action. I would request, from the applicant that, she, grant an extension for the board to act on this application until the July meeting.
July.
Yes, July, the 23rd.
Why?
So the reason why I'm asking is just so that, well, okay, let's back up to, how about the
We're in
June meeting?
April, May,
Or-
June. So you want to give a 60-day extension?
Yes, I would request a 60-day extension to the June meeting. Just so
And-
that we can get the testimony that we need and, so that the board doesn't have enough time to take action. on
But the
that.
goal would be to resolve it.
At the May meeting,
Yes, absolutely,
Right.
but the board
So
only
just in
has until
case-
May to, at this current moment, to take action on this application. We would need,
As till May 23rd.
yes.
Yes, so,
We would
and-
need an
and-
extension. of
yes,
time
and
to
our
reach-
meeting is at May 28th.
Yes.
Yes, hence the 60 days, got it. So traditionally, when we ask for an extension, we ask the applicant's attorney
Right.
to write a letter. The applicant is not using an attorney, how would we
If you could
proceed?
provide a written letter to the board granting a 60-day extension to the board's June meeting,
Yeah, they're requesting the extension.
we're requesting the
We're
extension.
We are.
They are granting the
I
extension.
gotcha. Okay.
So we need Ms. Lowe to grant us that extension because this hearing was delayed for several months due to difficulties in Ms. Lowe getting it public noticed
Got it.
after it was deemed complete.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Here's the feedback.
Yes.
A letter to the board granting a 60-day extension of the public hearing.
Of the board's ability to take action with respect to this matter. Whether to approve or deny.
And Holly, are you clear on what we might need from you to help us resolve this issue at the May 28th meeting?
Architect's presence. Evidence relating to the characteristics of the other accessory buildings in the alley, like their distance.
Mhm.
I don't know where their property lines are. I can only look at their distance from the alley line.
Turning radius for, just also, so where whoever's across the alley from you or else that needs to turn, who do park on that alley, how moving your building might affect their ability to get in and out of their driveways or outbuildings?
Was that to John's point, why the 5 feet instead of the proposed would be a hardship? Why that
Yes.
3-foot loss is an issue?
Yes, why the 3-foot loss would be a hardship?
And if you're if your request is gonna rely on proximity to the tree, then you really should show where the tree is.
show where the tree is, and
If you're gonna rely on that, that's gonna be your argument.
that's part of your argument.
And if you're gonna rely on the argument about the tree, would probably help if you had a letter from a arborist.
Well, we can do that as a condition of approval.
We could do that as a condition. of
Yes,
approval.
which the applicant has already agreed to.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not be excited at the idea of asking my architect to come up with fancy renderings and dioramas and things like that. That's why I suggested a free resource like Google Maps.
Yeah, but the board requires it in order to make their determination, so.
Not,
Not the architect.
I think we need to clarify whether it's 3D or not. I think
Right.
maybe that's the question,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
But we need you to find testimony to bring to us.
right, my question is, are information about, like, what we just discussed, the existing accessory structures and their distance to the alley line, so maybe some photographs of like what it looks
Mhm.
like.
Mhm.
And like a Google map, you can see it from a bird's eye view.
Yeah.
It's just, these things are expensive, and I don't wanna pay for like fancy 3D stuff from an architect, so I'm just asking, like, do the things that I laid out seem like sufficient pieces of information to help you?
So
see
this may be
access?
helpful to think about what we're struggling with is indeed that what it looks like, the turning radius, right, and the existing structures. So to what extent that you are comfortable that hopefully reasonable people looking at the document that you're going to provide, the visuals that you're going to provide will answer those questions. Whether that has to be expensive, whether it can be done with a free resource, with tools the architect already has, you know, we don't know that. But in order to make a recommendation, I think what we're asking is, we need to see what that's gonna actually look like. And right now, we don't have enough visual evidence to be definitive one way or another.
And I feel like I'm talking too much this meeting, but I do just want to know, we have in front of us in what was provided, I think 2 things
Right.
that come from Google Maps. And it sounds like that is not.
But not quite enough, right?
I don't think that came from Google Maps.
No, it
So-
looks like that was pulled from.
That's
the
also,
map.
yeah.
One of
the
these,
back line.
the one that says Google on it? Not the-
So,
Yeah, this one.
but yeah, some photos,
Satellite.
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 right,
Yeah.
but some photos actually in the alleyway, particularly before more things leaf out and are obscured by foliage, would probably be a very useful
We gotta try.
visual to use at various angles.
I just,
Possibly with some things in those photos to show size and distance. If that makes sense.
So if I could just say one more thing on that, your architect is gonna be coming to offer testimony, so work with them. They know, they've been through this before, they know what, you know, what it should take to make the case for why complying with the setback is an undue burden and why you're asking for relief.
And one more question to clarify, we are continuing the public notice.
Yes.
I think
No, you do not. I'm gonna make a statement to the public after, we're concluding this matter that, you're not required to give any further notice. I would just ask that any information that you're going to provide to the board before the next meeting be at least 10 days in advance of the next meeting, which is the 28th. So if you can provide that by the 18th to give our professionals the opportunity to take a look at it and revise whatever reports that they've prepared, that would be most helpful.
that's great. For the record, in case board members don't know, it sounds like some of you know, it costs about $350. No, that's not coming in the newspaper. Closer to $450 to do the newspaper and all of the
Yeah, we're-
notice.
We're aware.
So my other question is the adjustments to the plan. Those also need to be submitted 10 days prior to the.
No,
They don't have to be because we're allowing them to be conditions of approval. Yeah.
But if you felt like doing that, it would be fun. All right, so having said that, I think we will continue this public hearing on this matter until the May planning board meeting, which I do believe, if I'm not incorrect, is May 28th. And any other verbiage, with no further notice will be needed, and turn over to Ted to say what
This
needs
is
to be
to
said.
advise members of the public that the public hearing for this matter has been continued to the board's May 28th meeting. You will not receive any further notice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so Mr. Demblicker is rejoining us. We are moving on to the next public hearing, which is Dykeman Lot 43, Lot 9, 6 Chestnut Avenue. Various application, and this time the mayor is recusing himself, so he shall be exiting the scene. And we shall call you back when we get done this application. Thank you very much. I don't think I threw too much stuff in front of you, John. I was using your space, but I think I regrouped pretty well.
Good evening, Mr. DeSapia.
Good evening. Evening.
Fine Office has reviewed the applicant's public notice and proof of service, and we have determined that the board has jurisdiction to proceed with the public hearing.
I believe that you have a electronic copy of the affidavit of service. You want the originals, you'll mark that.
You don't need to mark it if it was already provided to the board.
Very good, thank you. I'm here with Robert and Patricia Dykeman, who own 6 Chestnut Avenue, Block 43, Lot 9. It's a vacant lot, and they're seeking necessary variances so that a house can be constructed. For the purposes of historical purposes, in December, I sent to the board and Mr. Clerico copy of the existing deed and title policy and the survey when the Dykemans acquired the property. And the survey noted that the lot was created as a part of a subdivision that was approved by the Borough Council in April of 1963. So I obtained a copy of the subdivision map, which I'd like to have entered into the record to show that the lot was created as a part of the neighborhood scheme.
And we're going to enter that as exhibit A1. This is a subdivision map from what?
1963.
Filed April 16, 1963, as map 203 in the Hunter County Clerk's office. Yes. So the first witness, I should like to have Mr. Dykeman come up.
Mr. Dykeman, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before this board shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Dykeman, are you and your wife Patricia the owner of 6 Chestnut Avenue, Block 43, Lot 9?
Yes.
And are you under contract to sell that property to a builder for the purposes of them constructing a single family home on the property?
Yes.
And did the builder find out that he needed variances in order to get approval to get a permit to construct a home?
Yes.
And is that why you're here tonight?
Yes.
Okay. And does the lot face Chestnut Avenue to the north?
Yes.
Okay. And the property to the east of the lot, Chestnut Avenue, is that fully developed with a home?
Yes.
And the property to the south of the lot in the
Yes.
rear, that fully develops with a home?
Yes.
And the property to the east of your lot, is that fully developed with a home?
Yes.
So is it the case that there would be no opportunity to acquire additional land from either of those three property owners to change the configuration of the lot.
Right.
I don't have anything further from Mr. Dyckman.
Does any member of the board have any questions for Mr. Dyckman?
Not at this time.
Or does any member of the public have any questions for Mr. Dyckman? All right, hearing none, if you'd like to present your next witness, we can move right along.
Our next witness is John Cornack, licensed civil engineer in New Jersey, as well as a licensed professional planner, but he's an expert witness in both areas. Do you want to qualify him as an expert?
Yes. Can you raise your right hand and swear, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before this board shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you give a background as to your education? Have you testified before this board in particular? Have you testified to boards in Hunterdon or Warren County?
Again, John Cornick, Kornick. I am a licensed professional engineer and professional planner in the state of New Jersey, both licenses in good standing. My professional engineering license I obtained in 2011, and my professional planning license I obtained in 2019. I have a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, believe it or not, in environmental science. That's the first degree from West Virginia University. And then decided that wasn't going to be a great career, so I moved into the civil engineering program at Drexel University and obtained that degree in professional science and civil engineering. I am the owner of K2 Consulting Engineers. I was part of this project. I have presented before boards in Hunterdon County. I do predominantly all of my work south of 195, Cape May County, all the way up to Ocean County, from the ocean all the way to Delaware. Anfield, New Jersey, so we do a lot of work in Camden County, Burlington County, Atlantic County, Cape May County. We have done work all the way north up beyond this area.
You provide testimony before planning and zoning boards.
I've presented to approximately 100 boards in my career so far.
Does any member of the board have any questions with respect to this man's qualifications to provide expert testimony as to planning and engineering?
The board can accept him as an expert on these
You're
subjects.
accepted as thank you.
John, where would you like to start? Would you like to start with the engineer and planner's comments or?
Well, I think the best way to go through is the project itself first, and then we go through some of the testimony with regards to the variance relief, the existing non-conforming conditions that are associated with the lot as it was created in the 60s. And then from there, go through the professional review letters and if we need to, and go through the whole process. So as indicated, this is identified as 6 Chestnut Avenue, block 43, lot 9. It is in your R1 low density residential zoning district. And we are proposing a single family dwelling. The lot area in the R1 zoning district required is 33,000 square feet. A little less than an acre, about 3/4 of an acre. In the existing condition, this site is 18,421 square feet. And if you go through your planner's review and your engineer's review, I apologize, 19,271 square feet. But as a condition of this design and plan, they're asking for right-of-way dedication. And that right-of-way dedication is to be consistent with creating a right-of-way that's wide enough for future plan and expansion of that road. If any are familiar with this particular property, it was serviced by a stone road essentially for its life. And it was recently paved by the borough and it's an approved road at this point. So with that right-of-way dedication, we're reducing the lot area, which is an existing non-conforming lot area of about 4.4%. So that will carry over into my discussion on impervious cover and all the other variances that we're requesting in this application. Chestnut Avenue is to the south of our property. We have a lot width and a lot frontage of 100 feet, where 120 feet is required by your ordinance. So that again is an existing non-conforming condition that we can't cure. And as Mr. DeSapio indicated, the lands around the proposed project are already developed. So there's no opportunity to go and ask for a subdivision or ask for more frontage from the neighboring properties. The property to the west, and just give you the orientation of this plan. North is to the bottom of the page, Chestnut Avenue. South is to the top. I gotta reverse myself. East is to the right of the page, and then west is to the left. Did I make that right? East is to the left, West to the right. The property to the plan left is an existing single-family home, has a few structures on the site. That particular property is twice the size of our proposed lot. And that was part of the overall subdivision. The property to the plan right is similar in size. It's a 0.44 acre or a 19,271 square feet, so it's consistent with our proposed lot. And if you know the area, the lots to the rear, to the south of us, there are two lots that are the same size, 0.44 acres. With regards to lot depth requirement in this zone is 220 feet, where in our proposed condition or the existing non-conforming condition, we're 192.71 feet. So we're deficient in that as well. With that, we have a uniquely shaped lot that was created in the 60s. And on top of that, we have a unique topography on this lot. We have a lot of topographic relief that falls from the front of the lot on Chestnut Avenue south to the rear of the lot. That gives us or affords us some opportunities to create a nice home with a walkout basement, which is a nice feature when you're building a home in this area. In our ordinance, you're only permitted to have 50% impervious cover on a lot that's 0.44 acres or 33,000 square feet. In this case, our lot's essentially cut in half or a little bit less than half. So that exacerbates the impervious cover requirements. But with this proposal, I'm going to carry on with the comments from the planner. We're proposing a 15.44% impervious cover. So we're slightly over what the ordinance allows. And that's with a reduced lot area and also with a reduced lot area because of the right-of-way dedication. So we're only exceeding that by 0.44 square feet. If you were to take the ordinance, we're permitted to do 2,763 square feet, more or less. And in this proposal, we're 2,844 square feet. Now, to address one of the comments with regards to the residential site improvement standard, number of bedrooms and the number of parking spaces, it is true, to get to the 3 parking spaces, a 2-car garage, and then parking in the driveway, we have to have a 20-foot wide driveway width. We proposed 18. Proposed 18 just because of the fact that we are exceeding impervious in the existing or in the proposed condition. But if we were to increase that driveway to 20 feet to get that 3rd parking space, that increases our lot impervious covered by 105 square feet. And that rounds up to 16,000 or 16%. So it's a minor increase so that we have adequate parking for a 4-bedroom home.
If I could interrupt very briefly during your testimony, there was, originally we had one plan and now we're up to the Montclair plan and we had 4 bedrooms and we had 5 bedrooms and somebody mentioned 6 bedrooms. How many bedrooms are we talking about? Just to be clear, because but we understand there's a lot of options on these plans, but it's very difficult for the board to make decisions when we're not even sure how many bedrooms we're talking about.
Sometimes I do get confused with the plans as well. We do a lot of these.
So as you go through, if you could just clarify some of those details, we'd be ever so grateful.
So we originally planned this, and I failed to mention, the plan is identified as the plot and grading variance plan. It's dated June 3rd, 2024, with a revision date of December 23rd, 2024. And this is the plan of record that was submitted after our completeness hearing. So D.R. Horton obviously has a catalog of homes that they have. And the original plan home on this was the Hadley model, which is the same exact model as this, the newer model that they have, the Montclair. The Hadley model had a bedroom on the 1st floor. Montclair has all the bedrooms on the 2nd floor. This proposed house will only be a 4-bedroom. Hope that clarifies that.
And which model is it?
This is the Montclair.
Montclair.
Again, it's the same exact footprint. The original one had the master bedroom down. These have all the bedrooms on the 2nd.
Thank you for that clarification.
So, in discussion of the variance relief that we originally requested of the plan submitted was a 15.44% impervious cover. 15% is the maximum permitted. And to address the comments with regard to driveway, I would respectfully request to increase that. Now I'm going to throw another little curveball. What we didn't think about, as I was sitting here with the client, is if they were to put a deck off the back of this house. So what we would ask is a 10 by 12 deck. That increases the impervious by another 120 square feet. And in doing that calculation, that rounds us up to 16.7%. That would be the request for variance, for a total of 3,069 square feet. I would hate to go and do this. They sell the house and that new owner wants to put a deck on the back and now they're back before the board. So I think it would be prudent to do that tonight rather than come back and look for that.
But a clarifying question, a deck doesn't have to be impervious.
So that's I don't disagree with you. I'd love to have that argument with the DEP on those discussions, but I think it would be safe to ask for that variance, even if they were to do that and put a patio under it, because it's a walkout basement.
Right.
A 10 by 12 is adequate and reasonably sized, so I think that would be an appropriate size to request.
Thank you.
One clarification, and maybe I got confused when you're testifying. Where's north on that?
North is to the bottom.
To the bottom, okay. So you're on the south side.
We're on the south side of the house. We would put that.
You're on the south side of Chestnut.
We're on the south side of Chestnut. And again, I typically don't like to have north down, but the road's on the bottom of the particular project.
And not that it's critical, but do you know which lot on this exhibit, that was submitted is the lot in question?
I can point it out to you. Give me a second, I can highlight it.
Or their number, it's just helpful to know.
45.
45.
It's that runs through, so it was lots for
35. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
And it looks like when some of these were acquired back, when they were acquired, somebody bought 2 lots and built a house on.
Yeah.
2 lots.
So, sorry, it was 35?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So, again, to change the application slightly, instead of the 15.44% impervious cover request, we're asking for 16.7. Again, that equates to 3,069 square feet. So with regards to the application, what we are asking for from a variance relief perspective, a non-conforming condition would be the front yard setback. So where your front yard is requiring, I believe, a 60-foot front yard setback, and we're proposing 52.5. And that again is merely a product of the right-of-way dedication request, that 7.5 feet of right-of-way. We could shift the house back further and certainly conform, but that increases impervious cover. And the houses on Chestnut are relatively set to that setback in the existing condition without the right-of-way dedication. The home is serviced by sanitary sewer or public sewer. It would be serviced by a private well. And there is gas on the road. They just put that in with the improvements. So they have those 3.
No, so the gas is already under the road and there's a side pipe to this property?
Yes, ma'am. Same with the sanitary sewer. So before they paved, D.R. Horton, they coordinated with the owner to make sure that got in there. So
Both of those are
both of those
good.
utilities, so that we wouldn't have to cut a new road, and you wouldn't be able to cut the new road anyway.
Because there's a moratorium. Yes,
So-
this was one of my questions. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it was pre-planned in that aspect. And part of this, we are removing trees on the site, and part of the plan is to plant new trees along both the east and west property lines and along Chestnut. I visited the site again today. Some of them are healthy, some of them aren't. I'm not an arborist nor a forester, but there would be no capability to protect the street during construction that we're asking to do.
Do you know what species of trees you're proposing?
So in the center of the lot, there are cedar trees, predominantly. And then, the 14-inch tree on Chestnut that's identified as dead already. The 20-inch tree that's on Chestnut appeared to me, it looked like a sweet maple or some type of maple tree. But I can't really identify the other, there's one tree in the center that we're tearing down that's not.
So that's gonna be removed and supplemented?
It will.
Okay, and do you know what size it would be at the time of planting?
So we're proposing an 1.5 inch caliper tree replacement, and we're proposing red maples and gray birch. So we're proposing to plant 14 trees as a result.
And that's gonna have to all comply with our tree removal and replacement ordinance.
Yes.
And it's probably consistent with the new state ordinance, so that's why we have that replaced.
How many trees was that?
We're taking down. 6, 7, 8, 9 trees that are live, 1 dead tree,
And you're replacing them with,
14.
depending on the diameter of those trees, you may need more trees than that.
We'll
You'll have to
certainly look at
comply with the
ordinance
ordinance on that.
and some towns have adopted the state ordinance, some haven't. And it'll-
We've got an ordinance that's adopted,
Great.
very specific.
We'll evaluate it, make sure we're in compliance. Again, so the 2 variances requests are for impervious cover and front yard setback. With regards to front yard setback, again, we place the home, it's consistent with the neighborhood. In this particular neighborhood, you have a series of single family, single story homes, and then you have a few that are 2-story as well. As the board does know, with regards to variance relief, I can probably argue this in the C1. But it's probably a little bit more prudent to argue in the C2, just because they're self-created variance requests with regards to impervious in the front yard. And I don't know how this board takes it, but usually existing non-conforming conditions, we don't really ask for the variance. It's an existing condition, it's gonna be codified as such. I don't know what you particularly like to hear about existing non-conformities.
I don't know that we need to go on too much about existing nonconformities.
Right, so with regards to the C2 criteria, obviously this board knows that, we must satisfy 5 of the statutory criteria, under the land use law. First being, that we are requesting a variance for a single piece of property, and this is a single piece of property owned by one owner. With regards to the purpose of this land use law, it must be advanced by this proposed deviation. The purposes will be shown as to how to advance by proposed deviation. The benefits of the proposed variance will substantially outweigh any detriments. The variance can be granted without substantial detriment to public good, and that the granting of the variance will not substantially impair the intent and purposes of the township's or borough's zoning plan and master plan. And then that granting of these variances as outlined will not substantially impair any of the ordinance associated with the R1 zoning district. With regards to the benefits as noted, this is again a uniquely shaped lot in the sense of it's undersized. And again, that was an undersized lot that was created in the 60s. That predated the municipal land use law, predated your zoning ordinance potentially. And that is an existing condition that we just can't modify at this point. Again, it's got unique topographic conditions. So this particular property falls from roughly elevation 297 all the way down to 281. So it's about 16 feet of topographic relief from the northwest corner down to the southeast corner.
How many feet was that?
About 16, 17 feet. With regards to the positive criteria, it's beneficial to look at the purposes of the municipal land use law. And in doing that, in my evaluation, I find that there's 3 purposes that I find are appropriate to this application. Purpose B, which is adequate light, air, and open space. We need all of the setback requirements as it relates to side and rear yard. I believe that the front yard setback, if we weren't required to provide right-of-way dedication, we would certainly need that as well. And we can certainly cure that by moving the house back another 7.5 feet to the 60-foot front yard setback, but then that again exacerbates the impervious cover requirements. I'm more sensitive to impervious cover than I am to that setback, in my opinion. And again, it's consistent with the neighborhood. So the front yard setback of this home is going to be in line with the existing homes that are out there, consistent with the trend in the neighborhood. Purpose E, which is promoting the establishment of appropriate population density and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, and regions. This particular lot, while undersized, can accommodate a single family home. We can do that by showing we have appropriate parking. We meet again side yard and rear yard setbacks, so we're not approaching into those setbacks. So I find that purpose E is appropriate.
Purpose E, you said?
Purpose E, and then purpose I, promote a desirable visual environment. If you look at the architecture that's proposed, we submitted prior to the meeting, again, this is a D.R. Horton Mid-Atlantic region product. Wade Architecture is the architect of record, but it's an attractive home, has multiple roof lines, has different architecture fenestration with the windows, hip roofs at the mid. So I think it's going to be a nice attractive home in this area. With regards to the negative criteria, I don't find that there's any negative impact as it relates to this particular site. Again, development always has a negative impact, so it's a hard statement to say and back up. But with regards to this application, we certainly are removing trees. We are replacing trees, but we will also augment that replacement after we review the ordinance thoroughly, make sure that we hit the target of the trees that are required to be replanted. We have a grading and drainage plan that is maintaining the existing drainage patterns. What we're doing with the drainage, with the driveway is pitching that to actually to Chestnut. So that would drain and sheet flow to Chestnut, and there's new drainage infrastructure that was installed with the new improvement. And then the rest of the land will be grass, which is consistent with the neighborhood and what's out there today.
Excuse me. How's the lot draining? You said that this is draining towards Chestnut?
No, so the overall drainage pattern now is draining from Chestnut through the lot.
Away from
south, away from Chestnut. But what we wanted to do is get the driveway draining towards Chestnut. So we have it raised up at a 5.5% slope. And we're pushing that runoff from the driveway towards Chestnut. The yard itself is draining around the land.
Having tried to push water uphill before, this is something you can do.
No, ma'am, no, what I'm saying is we've increased the slope and going to the garage, we're going from elevation 295 and our garage elevation is going to be, or I'm sorry, it's we're sloping towards.
You're sloping to a low point.
We're sloping to a low point in the middle. I'm thinking of a different project. What we did is we took half the driveway. So we're sloping the driveway from the garage to the center point of the driveway and then bringing that grading around to the side. So basically midpoint, pointing to the plan, we're draining to this location and then that runoff will come around the house. And then the rest of that from Chestnut will drain into that low point as well. So nothing's coming and taking out the Chestnut.
Okay.
Right, talking about grading the rear yard of this building, the basement's exposed basement.
It is, so it's a walkout basement. Thank you for correcting me on that. I was thinking of a different site.
In addition to the grading, are there any stormwater management features that you're proposing to mitigate any,
Increase, so obviously everybody's familiar with the New Jersey regulation. This particular site doesn't trigger stormwater management. So New Jersey state regulation triggers a 1 acre disturbance or an increase of impervious cover by a quarter acre. Quarter acre is equivalent to about 10,480 square feet, and we're well below that. So it's not required.
Well, no, but are you?
But we aren't proposing anything, and once we get into the grading and drainage plan review with the town, it may come up, and then we'll have to deal with that at that point. Again, with the negative criteria, in my professional opinion, there's no substantial impairment to the zone plan or the master plan. The massing and scale of the home is consistent with the neighborhood, it's consistent with new homes being built in the area. And again, I just feel that the proposal is consistent with the trend of new development in the community.
Right, are the board peppering with questions at this point?
Does any member of the board have any questions?
Questions for the engineer?
I wasn't sure if I understood the status of the well.
So this would be serviced by a potable well on site.
Right. But there wasn't any, I'm just looking for the comment, I think it is.
We're proposing a well on the west side of the home.
I'll go back to it.
Yeah, somebody did have a question about
Yeah,
it,
there was some, it was in
But I-
the letter.
but I don't remember who called that out. Did you call that out? Do you remember?
I think
I had some comments about.
Yeah, I thought.
You had some comments about the wells, Bob's letter?
There's a comment about where you look there.
It says that the current submission does not provide any information
Information
regarding.
for us, well.
No, point to this plan that we have a well proposed on the side yard. On the left side of the proposed home.
Yeah, I think my comment went to where are there wells on the joint property?
We didn't locate the wells on the adjoining. We can certainly go and try to find them.
But also, in number 6, you said the board should determine if they want to receive any documentation here, testimony with regard to concerns about the viability of the proposal.
That's, oh, yeah.
Am I reading?
Yeah,
right?
that's-
Of which?
Number 6.
That was more of a comment to the board. You were
Right.
here, that.
Listen, I'm not a professional well driller or licensed well driller, but a local well driller certainly knows the aquifers and where those wells need to go.
Because everybody on that hill's got one.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Most of the well drillers I know, they know exactly where the water
Yes.
is in their region. Unfortunately, I'm not a professional well driller.
I think the issue with the well is whether it would interfere with any of the adjacent wells, and therefore, you know, they wouldn't get the adequate supply out of it, so.
We deal with that in Pennsylvania market,
Mhm.
so I understand. So you're looking at the plume of influence.
Zone of depression, yeah.
But the well driller will indicate where the appropriate location is. If that has to be shifted, that's not a huge issue.
And that would be part of the process to apply to drill the well in the first place,
No.
correct? No?
I'm not sure
Yes, no?
if they have to locate adjacent wells, but.
No?
The point is that to make sure you have an adequate well, the well driller needs to take into account where the adjacent wells are.
Mhm.
I don't think it's something that we as a board, you know,
Have any
need to
jurisdiction over.
really, you know,
So I guess my concern was just whether, because the lot's smaller and,
yeah.
and whether that causes issues.
The issue would be, in my opinion, if you had a well on the adjacent property and your planned well was very close to it.
Right.
They may interfere and you may not get sufficient supply, so you would shift it. But that's something you gotta look at with the well driller, because there are records with the DEP for domestic wells, so it's pretty easy to find. Not necessarily where the well is, but what properties it's on, so.
It's something that we can
Yeah.
discuss with the builder and make sure that that's at least part of the discussion, is to the placement of that well.
Any other questions this time?
Well, does any member of the public have any questions as to Mr. Cornick's testimony? You want to come on up?
Questions, comments?
Just questions.
Just
So who,
questions.
where, what, why, and how.
Yes,
State your name and your address, please.
Erin Hitchcock, 7 Maple Avenue. We're located, my husband Russell Belmont. We're located just to the property. South.
You're right behind.
Yeah, we're the fence line just south of them.
Mhm.
So below on the hillside. Couple of questions, I suppose, is the height of the home and what regulations do we have in the town? Because in regard to aesthetics of surrounding homes on lots of similar size from past years, they're pre-existing to town zoning and everything, changes, adjustments to the times and everything as everything evolves. They're 1-story homes. in this neighborhood of the hillside. I'm understanding that they're proposing a two-story home with a walkout basement. Where there's a lot of questions involved on this, because what's the height regulation in the town? And the variance that's being proposed for that? Two, the question of,
Well, let's take it one at a time.
So, there are ordinance in town, so the maximum building height is 35 feet. And that's taken from average grade, finished grade, and that includes all sides and the rear. There's calculation on our plan, and we're under that, we're, at 33.27 feet, so we need the building height.
so my question is, to the grade that's currently existing, what's the depth you're seeking? To obtain 35 feet in height?
So it's
Of
the
the
average
building
grade of
proposed.
all sides. So with the walkout basement, we are, and I'm gonna point to the plan. The rear of the house is towards your house, obviously.
Yep.
The average grade at that rear is between elevation 280, 290 and 288. So our outside grade of our basement is proposed at 288.3. So we're matching existing grade.
So you'll need about 15 to 20 feet of depth to obtain a final building height of 35 feet to stay within code. 33 feet.
I'm not understanding your question, or I don't.
I'm not either.
Overall height of the building, what I'm getting at is that there's a greater concern of the hillside properties here that is not being addressed here at all. There's about 12 inches of dirt up there before we hit shale.
That's correct.
That was an experience that when the roads were put in, where we needed seismographs and everything to monitor the amount of
So,
damage.
Ma'am, I just wanna say,
going in
like,
When
if,
this was installed.
if you have any comments or concerns, you'll have an opportunity to do that right now. Right now, we're just limiting,
so,
you know.
but we can help out with that, so.
Well, it's a question about the height, because the height
Sure.
determines the
So
depth.
so that's why, if you followed my statement, the outside grade of the home is 288. And our basement finished floor is 288.3. So we're basically taking the foundation and putting it at grade in that location, because we did hit bedrock, so we did initial geotech on the site. And bedrock was right around 2.7 to 3.5 feet from existing grade. That's what set our finish floor.
So you're building on top of the shale, you're not digging down into the shale, is that what you're telling me?
That is.
You clarify that, that's at the rear of the house, how much are you digging at the front of the house?
So that test pit was taken at the center of the house at elevation 291, so that's why we're setting that 288. We're right above the
So
shale.
you did a test pit at the front of the house, and the shale is what elevation?
It's about, in that test pit location, it was 3.5 feet below existing grade.
And you're excavating how much at that point?
If you take that on average,
Well, no, at the front of the house.
that's the front of the house, that's the garage, so that's gonna be slab right there. But we would be excavating behind that. So we're right on top of shell. We set the foundation right on top of that on purpose.
So in other words, you're not excavating into the bedrock.
We're not.
Okay,
You're removing the soil and building it on top of the shale.
That's correct.
so. Sorry, do you have other questions?
Is that part of the variance build, that they were not disturbing the bedrock in this construction?
That's, I mean, it's not the purview of the board, my opinion, it's not the purview of the board. To determine what the foundation construction norms are.
If, God forbid, things change, plans change, things evolve in construction, we all know. Things happen. If that were to occur, what is the process? If the bedrock is going to be disturbed?
Well,
It's going to disturb
that's a
everything
construction.
surrounding, so what regulations do we have
Construction
to
code.
protect the surrounding leaves and surrounding foundations?
We have to follow.
If that is disturbed.
We have to follow UCC code, so that would be part of the construction permit requirements, that's not a zoning discussion.
Yeah, so in other words, your concern is any of the activities they're gonna be doing disturb your house, cause any structural.
Maybe just give a little more clarity. We had.
No, hold on, just a minute. You need to stand and give your name also, sir, and we're really just sticking to questions right now, but if you're gonna speak, you have to stand and give your name and your address.
We're referencing experience over the last year
Right.
with the road construction. And when the bedrock did need to be disturbed, the amount of regulation that needed to be maintained and controlled and surveyed and understood because of how it disturbed all of our home foundations. This is not far from our home. There's not any much of a greater distance of the home and the foundation of this home relative to our home, relative from our home to the road construction that just occurred. And this monitoring needed to occur then. It doesn't seem that it would need to be any different with a home.
But this is not the purview of the planning and zoning board.
If I could take your comment and turn it into a question for the professional, it would be, given the recent disturbance for construction of the road, and how it's affected your neighboring lot, are any of the proposed improvements going to negatively affect neighboring properties? I think is what you're.
So I know that the road construction is associated with sewer, and sewer is a deeper dig. So that I understand, knowing how deep sewer is on these hills, that's what the issue was. With regards to this, again, my opinion, as proposed, we're building on top of the shale. There's no intent to come in and crash through a shale, because that's an expensive construction effort. But under the UCC code, that would certainly be addressed. And then we would have to deal with it at a construction permit phase if we're successful tonight.
Okay.
The builder's here, he's hearing it. I'm not gonna speak for him, but we will certainly make sure that it's something that is understood.
Never said that. Wait one second.
Do you have another question, ma'am?
Yes, so my other question is, what in the plan is going to help alleviate the change of the impervious surface of this building structure? Because everything that's currently existing, the lot is too small to be building the structure on, which is why we're here. There's already a water problem at the rear of that property. We know based on recent construction over the last 12 months, the aquifers are significant on the north of us, which is where this is occurring. And neighboring properties farther north, the aquifer, there's water problems. Now we're increasing the water problem that is already in existence at the back of this lot. What is the proposed problem to rectify the change of the lack of now impervious surface? Decrease of the impervious surface when building this structure, that's now going to be shifted even farther to the rear of that property, which will impact us as a neighboring property.
So, and again, as I stated in the original testimony, this doesn't require under the regulations stormwater management, so it doesn't trigger the necessity of doing.
Under the state's regulations.
Under state's regulations. But this will be reviewed by your town engineer from a grading plan perspective. And if they require us to provide any type of mitigation or stormwater management, we'll have to do that at the time. Now, with regards to shale, because it is shallow in this location, you don't have infiltration properties, so it does continue to run through the hill and run through properties. But we can certainly look at something to do, small rain gardens or something at the rear of the lot to help slow that down and hold it back.
So you would agree as a condition of approval to install stormwater management features if required to the satisfaction of the board professionals, which may or may not include a rain garden
Or a bioswale?
or a bioswale.
Yeah, are you okay with that? Yeah, I think that's.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions for right now?
You are. Your turn.
Russ Dunlop, 7 Maple Avenue. Is it okay if I approach this so I can see the map?
Yeah.
Just
Yes.
make life easy?
Yes.
One of my questions was towards the rear of the property, there's an island with a giant pine tree, it's being choked out by vines, and there's, I guess it used to be an old koi pond. Towards the back of the property, this is us here, probably we're here, so that's probably located like right in here.
An
A
old-
giant pine tree.
An old koi pond.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody had a koi pond on an empty lot.
It's been there for years, it's been a mosquito den for years.
Fascinating. Go ahead.
And there's also electric back there and all sorts of stuff. I was wondering, is there a plan to remove that giant pine tree since it's being choked out by ivy? And what is the remediation that's gonna be done with that water feature?
Well, we'll keep the water feature to bring all the stormwater in. It's like today, I didn't see the koi pond there, I didn't see it.
You
didn't go.
kind of.
Yeah, so, listen, we'll work with the developer and look at the tree, obviously, we don't like to tear trees down.
All in here, so like right in here is where that giant pine is, that's probably not got much life left in it, and that pond is gonna be right in here.
Right.
And then just watch the electrical here is still live.
So I have it here, it says pond remnants to be removed, we're gonna remove it on plan that's identified.
Okay, just wanna find out what the status was gonna be with that tree.
Okay, if the tree is not healthy, then we'll have to take it down.
And feel free, when you come out, you can always, I can give you my number, you can always give me a call and I'll walk you through some around.
It's great.
Yeah, that was my main feature, again, my wife already brought up stormwater and all. And with the deck that you're proposing, how far would that take you off the?
So we have a 50-foot rear yard setback requirement in the R1 zone. The current setback of the home as it's set is 87.7 feet from that rear line. So it's a 10 by 12, so we would only be coming in 10 foot.
Is there any plans to add additional trees to the back? I know you had plans to replace stuff around the front and the sides, but anything towards the rear of the property as well?
There are none at this time. But if we have to put more trees on the site, we'll strategically put them along the back. If that's right.
Especially if some of those have to be removed, there would be.
So I want to ask a question to clarify regarding the deck. My understanding is you're asking us for impervious cover. The waiver on the impervious cover, so that the deck could be installed.
Variance and impervious coverage, not a waiver.
Variance. Thank you. But are you planning to install a deck
So
as part of the?
we are not proposing a deck in the plan today.
Right.
The builder's not proposing a deck. But the builder's building a house for spec to sell to somebody to come into the community, so I can only imagine if it were my house and I got a beautiful walkout basement that I would want to walk out onto a deck.
Right, okay.
So I think it's poor planning on our part, we would not show that on the plan and ask for that variance relief now. And then have a homeowner come in by themselves and try to do that, it's a challenge.
Understood, thank you.
Well, it's only a question about that. So if instead of a solid paver or forward deck, if there was some excavation with drainage, right, gravel, crushed stone, all that, and then wood with spacing above it or Trex or something like that, would that still be considered impervious, or is that?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's,
I do want to get the rest of the comments.
I'd love to go sit at the DEP with you and
No, I
go through that argument.
Yeah.
But that's considered impervious, we've not shells, crushed shells are considered impervious too, so. That's just unfortunate how they're evaluating that kind of.
But it is what it is. Are there any further questions from the public at this time? All right, I do feel compelled to point out that due to the bylaws of the Frenchtown Planning Board meeting, we stopped taking testimony at 10:30, which despite that clock, which is telling me it's 9:15, it is in fact 10:25. We don't turn off the lights at 10:30, but we are going to be winding up testimony here soon. Next step here is deliberation or asking for public comment.
Well, the next step would be to hear the applicant's next expert witness. Given the fact that we are 4 minutes until our cutoff time and there is still some discussion with an unrelated matter that we have. Now would be the time where we continue this public hearing to the May meeting. And given that there has been satisfactory notice, the applicant would not be required to provide additional notice and we can proceed.
Unless I'm missing something, we didn't intend to have another expert witness. What's the issue the board is thinking that we need to address yet?
Oh, I was told that you have the builder here
Yes,
and the
but
builder,
I went over the architecture,
Yeah.
what we talked about, heard from the neighbors.
okay,
I agree.
all right.
I don't think there's a need for the builder to come on.
Okay, if the applicant has no further witness, do you have any closing statement that you'd like to give?
I, just briefly, since your deadline is coming up, I believe that we satisfied the criteria for the variance, both positive and negative, and that it's the variances that we requested are warranted to enable the construction of a single family home on the lot.
Does any member of the public have any comments or concerns with respect to this application? You may come forward. You're gonna need to state your name again and where you live for the record.
Karen Hitchcock, 70 Maple Avenue. Thank you for hearing us out as neighbors and everybody in all of this process. I would just ask that the town please consider the neighboring properties and the properties that are of similar lot size, of historic value, that have been there and grandfathered through. They are single story homes. They are significantly smaller in square footage than the home that's being proposed here. And to please consider the water and impervious surface, the drainage involved in how that's going to affect our southern located property that we already know the end of that property has a gutter problem. And yes, to please address the live electrical that's on that lot and the water that's on that lot. And if there was please some sort of, side lot and back lot tree replacement as part of the plan, I would just please ask that you consider those things as a neighboring property for both aesthetic reasons, but also for structural integrity, resale, market value, and everything for the territory.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Okay, hearing none, we need a motion to close the public hearing portion.
Just one question for the applicant's witness. I know you're documenting that you're complying with building height. But in reading the height definition in the ordinance, I'm not sure you're calculating it correctly. Now, you're not seeking any variances or anything from building height. I'm just pointing out to you that you may not be calculating it correctly.
We'll look at it.
Okay, so we need a motion to close the public hearing.
Need a motion to close the public hearing? Do we have a motion?
I'll move.
I got John, seconded by John.
Paul?
Doherty,
Yes.
Herb,
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Red,
Yes.
Tomco,
Yes.
Branson,
Yes.
Zellweger,
Yes.
Eckel.
Yes.
So this is an application where the applicant is seeking the following C variances. The first one is for lot area where there is a minimum lot size of 33,000 square feet, and there is a pre-existing non-conforming lot area of 19,271, with the addition of that right of way that the applicant is dedicating that would limit the lot area further to 18,421 square feet. There's a variance here as to lot depth, where the applicant is, where the required is 220 feet for properties in the zone, and the applicant is proposing a lot depth of 184.21 feet. And then we have a variance for the front yard setback where 60 feet is required, and the applicant is proposing 52.5 feet. We also have a variance for impervious coverage as indicated in the testimony where 15% is required. The applicant is now proposing 16.7% impervious coverage. And there are a number of pre-existing non-conforming conditions with respect to minimum lot width, minimum lot depth and minimum lot size. So the applicant here is seeking relief under C2 variance. The requirements to satisfy the relief under that standard is that it needs to advance the purposes of the municipal land use law. We heard testimony from the applicant's expert witness that this proposed development will advance the purposes of the municipal land use law with respect to purpose B, E, and I. And the applicant also has to satisfy that the variance relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. We heard testimony to that effect as well. So at this time, the board can entertain a motion to approve the variances as set forth with the addition of the following conditions. Let's see, we have here, compliance with the board engineer's January 18th, 2025 review letter as clarified during testimony to be marked as Exhibit B1. We have compliance with the board planner's April 21st, 2025 review correspondence to be marked as Exhibit B2 as clarified during testimony. I also have conditions in here that the applicant shall comply with the tree removal ordinance. Let's see, and
Tree removal and replacement ordinance.
yes, and and also compliance with let's see, stormwater management features if required. Including but not limited to rain gardens or a bioswale to the satisfaction of the board professionals.
Couple of questions and clarifications. The percentages of impervious coverage, I thought I heard the applicant say they're gonna widen the driveway to 2 feet to comply with
Yes.
the parking standards.
16,
Are the numbers you're quoting, is that, are they from what's on the plan or what's gonna change?
So it's not what's on the plan, so
it's
we're
gonna be
changing it
something-
from 15.44 to 16.7.
16.7 include,
Quoted is correct.
and 16.7 includes the widening of the driveway from 18 to 20 and the addition of the 10-foot
That's-
deep deck.
Yeah, that's the one thing I wanted to get clear. I would also add in there to have them recalculate the building height per the definition in the ordinance. And to make any modifications to comply with the building height, if that's required. And on the issue of stormwater, I never liked that language, if required. Let's define what's the standard.
Sure. Stormwater management features, including but not limited to rain gardens or bioswale to the satisfaction of the board professionals.
But under what set of standards?
That's the issue.
Yeah,
'Cause there's no
you need to,
So what we do a lot of work in Pinelands. Pinelands does a difference of the new impervious roof runoff of a 2-year storm or a 10-year storm. You can't sit here and do a 10 or 10, 210 or 100-year storm model. It's just, it's never gonna work. So what we'll do is look at a 2-year storm event, see what the increase is and see if.
some towns do that, some towns just have established where, a capture the runoff from a 2-inch rainstorm or a 3-inch rainstorm or something. You can't just leave it up in the air.
You want it quantified.
Well, yeah,
Clearly.
it's not gonna be how I feel.
We'll look at-
about it, but-
so-
We'll look at the increase of a 2-year event and look at what that does to capture it on site.
So you've got the space,
2-year event.
2 years.
you've got the space, there's already apparently a dead tree that's coming down, you're gonna need to replace more trees than are already listed based on our ordinance and the trees that are already coming down. So I'll give you an opportunity to, you've got plenty of place to put a bioswale back there, which will capture and then drain, not sit there and turn into a mosquito haven, because it will capture and drain. Even though even shale eventually perks, it just takes it a long time. So capture and drain that. If the koi pond's been holding water that long, it's probably got a liner in it.
It's actually east of it.
Yeah, but there's gotta be some sort of liner in it or something. So some sort of bioswale and some vegetation in the back to both soften the back of the property and.
Look at a rain garden, because it has the properties of vegetation to take up the rainwater that's in there.
So you would install a rain garden to the satisfaction. of
We don't-
Professionals
But the standard is gonna be a 2-year storm.
based on
The standard's
standards.
gonna be a 2-year storm, and there is no landscape plan that was submitted with this.
Just the trees.
So, well, just
trees on his.
Yeah, some trees, but not enough trees that actually match our ordinance. So,
Well, they have to
maybe,
show document compliance, because they're not seeking relief from that, so.
right, so maybe showing document compliance
If
with
we
where the species that are going in, the size of the new trees that are going in, what's going in, and that same plan can also document what kind of water runoff management is going to be undertaken to manage a 2-year storm.
So your ordinance has a standard caliber tree replacement,
It
either
does.
1-for-1 or 2-for-1 or whatever it says.
It does.
Okay, and it's the species, don't think it's so.
Species, native trees, any native to Hunter County or any surrounding county, including Bucks County, is your choice of trees. You have a very wide selection of trees.
So the motion would be to approve with those conditions as previously stated.
Okay, I'll move that we approve with the conditions previously stated.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Paul.
Need a roll call?
Is there any further comments before the vote?
Just one clarification also.
Comment, the height, the issue about the height and the visuals with the manual, so it is not, if the height is consistent with the regulation, is it within the board's purview to say, well, maybe you're in the regulation, but just as an extremist, but nothing else is more than 15 feet tall, so
No.
we can't do anything there, okay?
Now, again, they're not seeking relief. They
Right.
have a calculation, but in looking at the calculation, I'm not sure they calculated it correctly.
Mhm.
So they're gonna need to recalculate it. They need to change the height of the house or grading, or whatever they need to do to.
So that's also
Or
a
they have to come
condition.
back here.
And
see
it
the height
it would be to the
variance.
satisfaction of the board professionals.
And just for the record, they introduced an exhibit as 1960, whatever it is, map 3 map. It's actually, and I would like the applicant to confirm this, it's actually lot 45 on here, not lot 35. Would you like to
That
confirm
was
that?
my understanding as well, but
45.
yeah. My understanding is 45.
I just didn't want the
That's
record.
how, that's how identified in this survey from 19,
There's Ward Street.
Yes, it's
survey
45.
from 2006.
It's not for the record.
All right, so that's clarified.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
We do. I forget who said top. Oh,
All second,
So we need a roll
Paul
call.
Conco. Yes, can we have a vote, please?
yes,
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
ready?
Yes.
Countdown.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you for your courtesies.
thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening. Someone could, need to fetch Brad from up top, although hopefully he's watching. All right, don't
a little nap.
don't go anywhere, people.
no fire rate.
Very certain is, having worked really hard on the tree removal and replacement ordinances, I can't quote the calibers and sciences, but I can quote parts of it pretty well. Yeah, there's a little help on that. All right.
You designed the subdivision.
No,
Oh.
no. Frank Bourne designed the subdivision. Frank Bourne signed the map as the borough. Which was actually very common back in the day. Very common back in the day. Let's see what those boys got elected with it, huh?
Clear to see. I guess if I saw it.
I think you forgot to vote.
It's always something. All right, so without further ado, we move on to, which I've completely lost my agenda, but I know it's affordable housing coming up, so I'm going to kick this, I think, very briefly to, I think, John,
Right.
and then to Darlene.
Yes, while he's speaking, you could take one and pass it on.
All right, go ahead, John.
So, and as you all know, I think, we've been working on the affordable housing issue for a while, and we've been very proactive. During 2024, this board formed a subcommittee led by Jean, which put together some good recommendations on how we can try to address our affordable housing requirements. And our goal as a community, embodied in the work that Jean's committee did, is to not rely only on new development or inclusionary zoning, support the goals of the master plan, find ways to incentivize property owners to help us meet the affordable housing goal, and expand opportunities for aging in place. And right now, as you are aware, the law was put into place last year, has a series of deadlines in it. We've been proactive on that. We've met our deadline requirements to date, which, correct me if I'm wrong, was the end of January was the first one. And following that, there was a 30-day period for challenges to the plans that we had submitted at that point, which basically what we said at the end of January was, we don't disagree with what the state came up with in terms of our affordable housing requirement, because we had no basis for challenging it. We looked at what they did and we found it was in conformance with the process that they had put together. We did not receive any challenges, so that's good. No one came forward and said, Frenchtown, you should have more affordable housing units, for example. So now we're facing a June 30th deadline for submitting our, what is the acronym stand for?
Housing Element Fair Share Plan.
Housing Element Fair Share Plan, HEFSP. So Darlene's going to go through so the Borough Council formed a new subcommittee, council members, of which I'm and some planning board members, so Randy, myself, and John are on that subcommittee, and I think there's some other people, but
Brad and Michelle,
right. And we've met several times recently to give Darlene input on the the HEFSP. So she's going to talk about that briefly. The timeline for that right now is it needs to be filed. We're going to file it on Friday, the 16th of May.
We're going to have it here at Borough Hall on file, not file with the program.
Right, so it'll be here on the 16th of May. It might not be here till 5 p.m. So first thing Monday morning.
That will be our plan.
That's our plan, right? That's our plan. I'll tell you what.
Yep.
So that's our plan. Monday, the following Monday or late that Friday, it would be publicly available for anybody to look at. We as a council, as a board, we need to review it. We need to have a hearing on it, a public hearing on May 28th at our next meeting. And then assuming that we have that hearing and
It's adopted.
we adopt the HEFSP, then we would forward it to council for their meeting on June 4th. Council would, I think the term of art is endorse the plan. And then our borough attorney would submit it to the court. Because this is actually the way this is constructed right now. It's going through the court. So that's to meet our deadline of June 30th. And, we're giving ourselves a little bit of room there in case we aren't able to get that done by June 4th. We have time to have a special hearing or special meeting if we need to make sure we're through. So with that as introduction, Johnny, do you want to talk about what you've handed out?
I'm gonna go through it briefly because I know the hour is late. So you've heard pieces of this before. So this is essentially the one sheet summary of the housing plan. So Frenchtown, like every other town in New Jersey, except for urban communities, has a 4-part obligation. The 2 new obligations we were given last year were the rehabilitation obligation and the fourth round obligation. Those were the two numbers that we had to file with the program by the end of January. Those are the only two numbers that were up for dispute. And so your rehabilitation obligation are homes in the town that are in need of one or more major structural repairs, roof, siding, HVAC, new well, new septic, something like that. The homeowners are income qualified, but the units are not deed restricted today. So there are supposedly 11 homes somewhere in town with 11 households that would meet the income guidelines. Prior round obligation is for the first two rounds. So that was first round and second round, spans from 1987 to 1999. That number has been set. That number is 2. Third round is from 1999 to 2025. It's longer because there was all sorts of litigation. It should have been 2.6 rounds, but it's only 1 round. That number is also set in stone at 52. Fourth round is the round we're about to head into. We'll go from 2025 to 2035, which is the 10-year period, which are what the rounds are supposed to be. The number that we've agreed to, and we now have a court order confirming that number, is 22. So the prior round and the third round mechanisms you see in the table below were already agreed to as part of our third round court approved housing plan. So there's nothing really to discuss because those have already been set in stone. The rehab and the fourth round are what we are trying to plan for. So for the rehab, there are a host of options that you can use to address that obligation. In discussing it with the subcommittee, we've selected 3 mechanisms. First is a borough-sponsored program. That's where we would use the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We have a small trust fund, but I'm going to stretch it very far to do 3 borough-sponsored rehabilitation home rehabs in town. The second program is that Hunterdon County, not every county has their own home improvement program. Hunterdon County happens to have one. So what we can do is advertise that program through a variety of mediums, whether it's on the website or a newsletter or at community days or whatnot, to alert residents that there is an existing county program. That, other than the advertising, costs us nothing. So 4 of the units we're going to attempt to have go through the county program. The program that I find most exciting and intriguing is this ECHO unit program. And you did receive in your board packet my handy dandy ECHO 1-pager. And an ECHO unit is something that we have talked about a lot here. Is essentially a tiny home in someone's backyard that is for elderly or disabled folks who are income qualified. What I like about an ECHO unit and what makes them unique from every other mechanism that towns have available to them is that the homeowner gets to select their occupant. You are not allowed to do that in any other affordable housing situation. You have to do the random lottery that's advertised through the 3 counties. And as long as that tenant meets the background check and the credit check, you have to accept them. So here, someone could punt their elderly in-laws in their tiny house in their backyard, as long as they're income qualified. For example, the program, the way the rules are written, which are the prior round rules that are antiquated and have not been updated, say that the town has to own or lease the ECHO unit and then pick it up and put it somewhere else after 10 years. We do not, no one does that. 2, that doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons, because what if you move your elderly in-laws into your tiny home and they're 65? 10 years later, they might still be alive. And if you have to pick it up and move it somewhere else, now we're displacing people. And so what I have discussed with the subcommittee is asking for a waiver from that provision because it doesn't make sense. Furthermore, the construction industry has come so far when the 5:93 rules were written that tiny homes weren't a concept in the early 90s, nor were these modular constructions where you can just, bring in a home and plop it down. And so that would be our third mechanism to round out the mechanisms to address the rehab obligation. Yes, ma'am.
Which is actually why I I made copies of zoning map because I knew everybody wouldn't have it tattooed to the back of their hand. So because one of the questions that we came up is whether or not to allow that.
Yes, I want to tackle
And-
that at the end.
Oh, okay, okay. I
Yes, but
just-
yes, keep your hand
Yep,
out
yep,
handy.
yep, yep.
So prior round, just as a refresher or a reminder, the part of the River Mills affordable housing units are allocated to prior round. In certain instances, for certain types of affordable housing units, you get bonus credits. So you'll see some mechanisms are allocated bonuses, others are not. You are also capped on bonuses, so it's not a free-for-all and take as many bonuses as you want. The third round, as I said, was already established by the court. In there, we had Shale Cliff, River Mills, the Sapio Senior Apartments, that already exists, it's on the ground. Ceramics plant, which is Harrison Square, we've already built that. Then there are a handful of properties that we rezoned R8B for inclusionary development. The church and daycare next door was rezoned for inclusionary development. The 8th and Milford properties, which we're actually referred to tonight, that were built are addressing part of our obligation. And then there was the expansion of the R3 zone along Trenton Avenue where the existing apartment complex is. Those are all the mechanisms that were approved by the court. There is one additional mechanism that is not on here, and that is the R8E zone. We heard this application a couple of months ago. This was the duplex on Kingwood Avenue. As you will recall, there was an unmapped stream that is a C1 waterway, and DEP will not let them build more than a duplex on that property. Therefore, we are not going to get affordable units out of that site. So that has to be removed from our plan. Furthermore, I've been working with the borough attorney, Mr. Cruz, about the Shale Cliff site because the environmental, DEP's rules are ever changing and they've changed the flood hazard areas. And so we are still reviewing that to see if it still meets the affordable housing criteria to be included in the plan. So what you may see is that Shale Cliff may come out depending on what our findings are. If it does, we will be a few units short for the third round. And in that instance, what I'll be asking for is what they call a reverse Cherry Hill. So it's essentially a backwards looking vacant land adjustment. Typically they are forward looking, but in this instance, it goes backwards. So that's the third round. So then the last thing that we have to plan for and undertake is the fourth round. Under the rules, towns can seek adjustments. There are two main adjustments. One is for utilities. If you have a lack of water or sewer capacity, it's a durational adjustment. Also, if you have a lack of vacant and developable land, you can seek a vacant land adjustment. Because of all the environmental constraints in Frenchtown and your built out nature, combining that with your finite water and sewer service areas, we conducted a vacant land adjustment. It should come as no surprise to you that based on that, there are 0 lots that are of a sufficient size that are free of environmental constraints to build inclusionary housing. I would note that DCA, when they prepared our number, also indicated there are 0 developable acres. So in the world of affordable housing, that means that your number of 22 for the fourth round is reduced to 0 and what they call a realistic development potential. So we have a 0 unit realistic development potential. So we have to satisfy 0 affordable housing units. But the rules then say, well, you need to address some of the difference. That's what they call unmet need. In this case would be 22. And so what we are putting in the plan is something that we already have today. We have the Frenchtown Village Center plan where we encourage redevelopment in selective instances. The way the Frenchtown Village Center plan is written is that if someone did choose to redevelop, they have to provide either a 15% set aside if it's rental or a 20% set aside if it's sale. And my recommendation and what we would be doing is drafting an ordinance to say it's going to be a 20% set aside regardless of tenure. Historically, towns had a lower set aside for rental because you were allowed to get a rental bonus credit. That rental bonus credit has been eliminated. So now there's no reason to give rental developers the benefit of a reduced set aside. It should be flat across the board. And this is something that I'm doing in all of my towns. And also because you're a vacant land town. So when we have property become available for redevelopment, we should ensure that we're getting the most affordable housing units out of it that we can within the confines of the law. So that is the framework of the plan. Tonight, we're seeking feedback from the planning board on the echo mechanism, because in speaking with the subcommittee, my recommendation, and this is where your handy dandy zoning map is useful, was that we should limit this to the R1 zone, and we could consider allowing it in the R2 zone. I am very concerned that the R2 zone is going to present a host of difficulties because of the fact that the majority of those lots are undersized. And as we've witnessed earlier this evening, present a lot of logistical hurdles with setbacks, coverage, etc. So you'll see here the definition. The definition is from the 5:93 rules. Jean, I did get your comment. Disabled is not defined. It will be up to our administrative agent to determine what that exactly is. I've
We
got
should talk
some.
about that. I'd like to talk about that. We don't do it right this minute. but-
Okay, yes, and that will, we can worry about that when the state approves our program. And hope, I should say, yeah, when, not if, when. So. My recommendation would be that the draft ordinance, it has to, under the rules, contain a single family home, any property that would want to come forward. Because this unit is accessory to an existing single family home. My recommendation would be that the lot that they want to situate it on should meet the minimum lot size. That the echo unit must comply with the applicable accessory structure setbacks. And then when an echo unit's installed on a property, that we would increase the maximum impervious coverage. And I added impervious coverage to both of the respective zones, depending on which one we select. I would suggest capping the height at 1 story and 18 feet. And limiting the square footage of it, because once again, we want to make sure that this is accessory, that this doesn't spiral and grow and become essentially, a second principal home.
Yeah.
And so 500 square feet, I included a floor plan. There are companies that do this in other states. It's wild.
Yeah.
We're very far behind here in New Jersey. And then also a definition about what it needs to have inside of it, sanitary facilities, kitchen, etc. So the questions I have for the planning board tonight is, do we want to allow this in only the R1 zone, or do we also want to allow this in the R2 zone? And secondly, do we want to mandate parking for the echo unit if it's constructed on a site?
I have a question. I like, the concept's interesting and innovative and different. And certainly might take care of some of the whole aging in place conversations we've had.
Yeah.
So many boxes.
The only question I have here with the R zone, a lot of those homes do not have public water. They rely upon well. So does that discount the ability to do that?
I can tell you,
Because we tried to do water when we did the sewer project up there and the residents overwhelmingly rejected it.
yeah,
in all
so
the streets up there.
I can tell you Tewksbury does, so there's another version of this program called an accessory apartment program where you don't get to select your tenant. Tewksbury, we got, oh my gosh, 30 plus of them, and
Okay.
there's very
They're
little water,
well, yeah,
yeah,
most
oh
of them
well.
too.
So it's gonna be up to, the health department, whoever decides on wells. Whether or not they've got enough pumping capacity.
And Brad, if I'm not mistaken, that's about the outline of our water service in town. In the R1.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
It goes up Ward Street.
Does it go up, Art?
Yeah, it stops at Ron Swarn's house.
I'm sure that's accidental. So it goes up here. So if anybody wants to know, that's approximately the extent of water service.
And I
in town.
think.
Everybody beyond that's on well.
Ward and Chestnut has it, but I think everyone else is well,
If anybody's curious.
But
pass
no,
it
it's a
around.
good question.
yeah,
But I can tell you, we've done a boatload of them in Tewksbury on well.
All right.
okay,
Good,
that was just my
good.
question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and what
think
we're
that's
really
doable.
looking at here is we're looking at. From this point of view, to meet our obligation, we're looking at 4 of them. Somewhere in the borough.
We're
So
hoping for 4 of them, but we're
Hoping,
not
hoping.
capping it at 4 of them.
No,
I mean, we
so
could get
Ted brought
30
up an
from-
excellent question that he emailed me. Is there going to be a cap? So what I will tell you is, I'm working on the housing plan, working on the spending plan. And part of my justification for the request of the waiver, saying that we're not going, we Frenchtown is not going to own or lease modular tiny homes and drive them around, will be that, I can see Sam's
Maybe.
part-time job, RV lady, we will give a small amount from the trust fund to help pay for the cost of the unit. Where the financial incentive really lies is that they get to keep the unit forever. And so it's increasing the value of their property. So when the 10-year deed restriction ends, they can choose to keep their elderly income-strapped in-laws in the tiny home or get them out and start charging market rate unit. So there's a built-in value add to folks who take advantage of this program. If we were sitting here talking about an accessory apartment program, the rules cap you at a maximum of 10 units at a time. Because there were towns who were trying to be slick and said, oh, I have a 100-unit obligation. We'll satisfy all 100 with accessory apartments. And then they didn't build any.
Yeah.
So in response to that, the rule said, okay, wait, you only get 10 at a time. Once you do 10 successfully, then you'll get another 10.
Okay.
So I think it would be wise in our zoning ordinance to put a cap on it. The first 4 will only get a stipend. Anyone after that will not get a stipend, and they could still do it until we reach whatever cap we've established. So what I think we might want to
At which point
consider.
we could revisit the cap if we decide that this is a glorious
Exactly.
idea.
Right, or conversely, if it's been horrible, we're done.
We're done.
So potentially the cap may be 5. And then if everything is fine and there's no issues, we can amend the zoning ordinance to increase it to 10. The state will not penalize us for doing more.
So we're using the borough's Affordable Housing Trust Fund for the borough sponsored programs, and some funds go to the ECHO units.
Yes.
But when our committee was meeting, we were sort of impressed with how small the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was.
Like
And-
30 grand or something.
And we also thought,
48.
we had recommended that it should be looked into as to whether we were not tapping all the things that we could be tapping for revenue for that fund.
Right,
So
I don't
do
know if that
things
was
like
done.
that. No, it wasn't done. So do things like that get wrapped up into this? Spot?
I don't think it does get wrapped up in this plan, but that's a good thing perhaps to look at moving forward.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
so I don't think that has to be part of the plan,
Okay.
but it doesn't mean it's not something we shouldn't be doing.
So don't forget, for example, the duplex that will be constructed,
Right.
they will have to pay a residential development fee.
Right.
The new single family home that you just approved will have to pay a
Right,
development fee.
but the couple of things, and this is my memory's fuzzy, your memory's probably fuzzy, was that it wasn't clear to us whether we were
Right.
being,
Oh, whether we were
diligent.
capturing everything?
Yeah.
right,
And I looked at your memo again today and I said, uh-oh, I've got work to do.
right,
So Sam, I'm gonna come talk to you about, stuff like that, because I think part of, with the transition of staff, they've been looking at a lot of things
right.
and trying to make sure that we are.
So there was that about being diligent, but there was also something, maybe Paul remembers, he's younger than I am, about that there were some types of properties we could be tapping for funds for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but we were choosing not to.
Oh, additions.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so it was 2 things that we had talked about.
So under
There
the
you go.
statute, you have flexibility on the residential fees. You have no flexibility on non-residential. That's guided by the municipal land use law. And some towns choose to charge an affordable housing fee for everything. You want a deck, you get an affordable housing fee. Other towns are at the opposite end of the spectrum and say, we're not gonna nickel and dime homeowners for improving their properties. Instead, we're only going to charge them an affordable housing fee when they build a new home. And then there's also somewhere in the middle. I have one town, because we're seeing a boatload of additions where we're currently only charging for new home construction. But we're going to be amending the ordinance to say if you're adding more than 500 square feet, then you're going to be charged an affordable housing fee.
And maybe that was okay before, but now we're tapping into it.
Well, and theoretically, we have to spend the trust fund down in the 10-year period.
Okay.
So we were supposed to spend it down during the third round. But that did not happen.
Right.
Well,
So,
and that might be part and parcel too, if we look at additions and homeowners projects, you know, because we're also looking at aging in place. You know, we don't want to nickel and dime the folks that are trying to widen their bathroom doors so they can get a wheelchair in there. But so, yeah, that, we may have to look hard at what we're gonna look at if we're gonna put an affordable housing fee on additions.
so, going back to your questions, do we
Yes.
allow it only in R1 or R2? You know, personally, I'd like to allow it in both. I can see the, you know, the challenges of doing it in R1. But with respect to parking, I don't think we should require parking space for the property with an echo unit, because you know, that I think is part of the problem with the affordable housing, or the affordability of housing, is, you know, burdening it with parking requirements. So,
Darlene, I assume that there's a limitation how many people you can put in the echo unit, right?
That's a great question.
I asked that with all sincerity.
So that's why I suggested,
I just, the county level, we do voucher
It's a
system.
great question.
You have to, you know, the vouchers have to match up with who's going into the homes.
Yeah,
And, I mean, there is a standard, that's why I'm wondering if these come with their own standards.
so. And maybe Ted can tell me if I'm going too far beyond the powers of a municipality, but there has to be a deed restriction recorded. And to me, the deed restriction could not only say that this is a 1-bedroom, low-income, affordable unit, I think it could maybe, unless I went too far, say that it's for, with a maximum occupancy of blank individuals. Now, but this then is going to boil down to code enforcement.
Yeah, that would be, it would be deferred to code enforcement, I would think. You know, just based on the square footage that we're limiting these units to, you know.
I mean, I
But
would get the concept, and if you have a disabled relative, let's say, just for example, or elderly parents. But if all of a sudden that echo unit's housing 4 to 5 people,
I agree.
this is a different conversation. And then the parking thing starts becoming more of an issue.
Right, then saying, oh, you don't need a parking
Yeah.
space for the one person living there.
but having, like, on how many people could live in an echo unit would give code enforcement something to hang their hat on.
Yeah.
If somebody complained and said, look, it's looking like a clown car over there, you know, and that would give them some way to address that. Because, you know, taking your example, you know, you've got an elderly relative that's living there and now they need a full-time caregiver. You know, well, now you've got, you've got, you know, the caregiver maybe living on a couch because they're taking care of, you know, because some, you know, that could be a
Yeah.
thing. But we're, you know, when we start talking 5 and 6 people, we've got a problem. So that, I think we can probably write something creative about that, so that, we can limit it and give code enforcement some teeth if it winds up becoming a problem for some
Well,
reason.
especially when it goes past the 10-year mark, right? That would be my concern. Obviously, it's gonna
Yes.
reach out after 10 years.
Yes.
We talk about adding value, probably, yeah, I think you could put some bunk beds in there and get,
How many
More-
college students can live in a 500
Right.
square foot? Yes, I understand.
yeah.
So, but I think we should be able to put something together. Yeah,
Any reason for me to say, or?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Look, Bob, you just.
Fascinating discussion.
Thank you, Bob.
thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
So Darlene, in terms of the comment I emailed, you don't think we have to address that at this point? And for others, I had suggested that nationally, there's a very robust conversation about the definition of disability and we may want to have a clause here that indicates what we need, you know, which could be as simple as defined by the ADA, but it
Yes.
could also be other things.
I think it might be good to link it to something established like the ADA as opposed to leaving it open to interpretation.
I didn't have a chance to look at the, I wanted to look at the 5.97 rules to see if they define it. If so, it's not in any of the COA regs, or there's actually current DCA regs, then I have no problem saying as defined by age.
So I just, the borough currently does have an ordinance with regard to occupancy standards. It says in referring to referring certified households to specific restricted units, the administrative agent shall, to the extent feasible and without causing an undue delay, the occupancy of a unit strive to, and then, there's a subsection D, prevent more than two persons from occupying a single bedroom.
That's going to change eventually.
Oh.
So, you win an award for finding that. The state has adopted interim temporary UHAC regulations, and that's one of the sections it changes.
Oh.
So when they, those are temporary until December of this year. Once we get new final regulations, we will have to go back and change the affordable housing ordinance, which is where Ted's citing from.
So there will be a mechanism in place to enforce occupancy standards.
True, but we may not like the way it reads.
Okay.
Alright,
They're getting very generous.
okay,
They
but it's,
define bunk beds.
Sardines.
there you go. Alright, so that was a lot.
Wait, I don't know, do we have consensus yet on a zone? Or zones?
No, I was gonna, that's where I was gonna go.
Oh, okay.
Because we haven't really talked about the parking, we haven't talked about the zones and how people feel about R1 and R2. Or just R1. You know,
We could always change, right? If we just, you're suggesting we start with we do R1. Right? Because
I
R2
think
is so messy.
R2 is very messy. I don't know how many lots in R2 actually even meet the minimum lot size.
it's mainly
In
gonna be
in
ones down
R2,
here.
it's got such a parking problem.
Right.
On Sundays on 4th Street,
Yeah,
and
it's a
somebody has a
mess, yeah.
party, there's a snowstorm.
Yeah, no, I
People
tend to agree
parking.
with Darlene, and if this becomes a whopping success, we could always change it.
Yeah, maybe start small.
So would all.
Yeah, R1,
This small
R1 by and
number-
large has bigger lots.
Yeah, and this is just a question Noah wasn't fine answered, but because we're talking such a small number. As opposed to thinking about in general for R2, might there be an exception? So would we take an application and look at a case by case basis because we're looking at such a small number? And so do we want to completely exclude?
Could they
if two
come as a
people-
variance?
Yes, they could, because it's gonna
Yeah.
be.
Interesting.
It'd be a use variance.
Yeah, they could come as a variance. So if one of these larger,
Restriction as the condition of the.
yeah, could do that.
I mean, they're
In
never
R1.
gonna meet the setback requirement.
Well,
Look at- I mean,
R1, have it in R1, but have the R2, you could apply, I mean, you could
can
apply,
apply.
anything, you know.
I'm against it. I think R2 is way too crowded.
I agree.
And
But they would-
way-
but
and
they
way-
becoming-
way too small.
But they become force as as a variance, is what you're saying,
Right.
so,
It could be one,
put it,
right? It could be
put it
one.
in as R1.
Yeah.
But, if somebody,
Well, you can't stop them.
if somebody comes for us that they would be able to, anybody in town would be able to come before us for a variance for that. But they also have to fit all this side yard setbacks and whatnot and which isn't gonna work in almost any R1
I mean, you can't even put
or
an
R2
addition
lot.
on it too without.
Yeah.
coming to us.
Well, I think that might be true at the lower end, which I think might be where you are at the lower end of R2. I feel like the upper,
I'm in the middle. I'm on seven.
you're.
Seven.
It's on Harrison.
I mean,
I think we can start with R1 comfortably. Knowing that there would be an opportunity for somebody to come in for a variance if they had a desperate need to put in an echo unit. And they lived in one of the other zones, they could come before us and ask
Really
and,
interesting.
Yeah.
yeah, we'd be like, well, show us your setbacks.
Love that, right?
Yeah.
That would work.
So in
And-
other words, if we allow it in R1. If we're not excluding it from R2, you would just come in with a use variance
Yeah.
for R2, okay?
Okay, that's the first part.
Parking.
And like I said, I'm cautious about, putting a parking requirement on top of it.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm less concerned provided there's some kind of capacity limitation.
Right.
For the number of people.
Right.
Yeah, that reside. in the-
Yeah.
Exactly.
And much of R1 doesn't have street side parking, but most of them have much bigger driveways. So. So no parking requirements, what I'm hearing,
Okay.
R1 and no parking requirement,
Cap.
cap,
A number of occupants.
no, cap on number of units.
Units, so.
You know, we talked about starting with a small number as a pilot program.
Sure.
Is everyone comfortable with 5?
I could even be
I am.
comfortable with 6.
I'm fine.
I could really stretch myself.
Yeah.
Five's a nice round.
Some people like 5.
Five.
Okay. No, I was gonna really go out, you know.
You know, if I'm not to go to 6. Whoa.
Okay, so separate from the affordable housing provisions, are there other, I haven't looked at our housing element in ages, so what else goes in a housing element? Are we changing anything there,
Oh, yes. So,
separate from affordable housing?
well, the housing element is regulated by the amended Fair Housing Act. So
Right.
there's 3 chapters on demographic standards that are required. The next chapter has to deal with construction permits and projected construction permits. Then after that, it dives into capacity. So land capacity, utility capacity. Has any developer expressed interest in building in Frenchtown? There has to be a chapter on the state plan and how we're consistent with it. There has to be a chapter on multi-continuity, something. That's a new requirement. Then the last 2 chapters are: what is our obligation? What are our mechanisms that exist on the ground today? And what are our mechanisms that are proposed? Attached to the housing plan will be the spending plan, will be an ordinance making the updates that I've talked to the subcommittee about. Strategic select changes to our existing zones to demonstrate that they still are viable. Then we will have attached to that the municipal housing resolution, the administrative agent resolution, and an intent to bond resolution.
Okay, but nothing about like design standards or anything like that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
And to be clear, the long list of stuff you just went through is not June 30th. That comes,
Oh, that has to be
that's
drafted.
Oh, that has to be drafted,
That's
but
part of the element.
right?
that has to be drafted and in the Borough Hall by May 16th.
Okay, all right. So you're busy, aren't you? But the ordinance doesn't have to be adopted by council.
Correct.
It just draft submitted to the court. Thank you.
Yes, so that's part of the reason why I want to have this discussion tonight, so I can figure out where I'm inserting this, what zones am I inserting this into? And making sure we're all aligned on parking, the size and whatnot, so I can begin to draft that, because as you mentioned at the beginning, this is all gonna be on file in like 3 weeks.
And this will all get us through our obligation, our deadline obligation for this round as we continue to look at this and other affordable housing improvements in the borough.
Yes, so there will be another challenge window after the
Yes.
deadline. And so there may be an instance where we have to go back and make certain amendments to the housing plan, depending on what challenges.
Whether or not it gets challenged.
Right, and then the program gets to review the housing plan after the challenge window.
I do believe I understood you or someone else to say that most of the challenges are being anticipated in the larger municipalities that have a lot more capacity. So, you know, there's very, we're not really anticipating, knock on wood, any challenges necessarily to our plan, particularly since we are showing that we have, we haven't built all of our past round obligation, but we have made progress on that. We have actually built quite a few of them and fulfilled those obligations. So we have shown progress toward creating affordable housing in the borough, which helps also.
Thanks.
So I think I was just saying what you said last time, but you didn't say it tonight, so I thought I'd say it.
Can your office have a resolution prepared for us for the May 28th meeting?
Yes.
It's already, oh, yeah, we needed.
Are we gonna do a special meeting?
Not unless we have to.
Okay.
The plan is not to.
Not that?
No, that's the
That's the
notice.
reason?
That's the.
No, that's the notice.
I need
Ah,
the,
you need the resolution. Okay.
Yes.
Make a note of that, but yes.
All right,
Or there-
all right, so other questions about this?
Speaking of notices, et cetera, our normal public notification process is sufficient. our regular meeting on the 28th is noticed, or,
We have to notice.
There's special notice requirements for an amendment to the master plan.
Which is what
I
this is.
emailed Sam as the board secretary. There's a number of entities that you need to provide notice by certified mail to, including clerks of the adjoining municipalities, which would be Kingwood Township and Alexandria Township. We have the Office of Planning Advocacy, which is run by the Department of State, as well as the Hunterdon County Planning Board. And the Hunterdon County Planning Board and the Office of Planning Advocacy would also need to receive any copies of reports, any resolutions that were adopted by the board.
okay.
That's just what's required under the
And
statute.
that's triggered because the planning board is gonna adopt a resolution.
For an amendment to the
For
master.
amendment to the master
You
plan,
know, all
which then goes to council for their endorsement,
endorsed,
which
Thank
then goes to. Gets turned
and then
into
the
the
draft
housing.
ordinance that would come later and would be,
Yeah.
Right, we would not adopt the ordinances until the program approves the housing plan and signs off on the ordinances.
Should we consider any other design standards other than an 18-foot high limit? Pitched
Oh,
roof, I
Pitch,
mean,
I actually jotted down pitch roof, I forgot we mentioned that.
I don't think we have, but we like beat everybody else up. They gotta have a porch, they gotta do this, they gotta do that, and then we don't, you know.
Then we gotta polish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it, you know.
Container.
Have you seen some of the, they have now where they unfold, you bring them, they sit up, they just unfold, and you open the door.
Pop-up tent.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, one conversation
Alright.
makes it very difficult for minutes to be
That's
captured
my
when we're all
bad.
talking at once. Anything further on this right now? Other than the fact that we should all buy Darlene some caffeine between now and May 16th.
Actually, I'll meet after that too.
Okay.
Well, are we, the other piece is about setbacks, and we're going with what, we're not making any exceptions or changes to adopt to these units, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is everybody good with all that?
Thank you.
Excellent. You have a plan, move forward on, yay. All right, really,
By the way, Darlene, thank you for everything you've done.
oh my God.
thank you, Doreen.
It's amazing.
Nicely done.
Not there yet, I'm
Moving forward very briefly, or very quickly, aging in place committee update, we got anything yet? We haven't yet.
I sent an email a bunch of with a listing of both available resources and examples. So in terms of, you know, there's a lot out there in terms of the grant money. There's a lot of nonprofits, charitable organizations that provide guidance resources for my favorite price point. So.
Did you get a chance to try to look into an ordinance? You and I talked about it right at the end of the last planning board meeting about looking up ordinances, existing ordinances in other municipalities. That
Yeah,
would allow-
I said that email contained link to a few. I can get some more.
Yeah, okay, I did not see that. That was, I will dig for that. Very good. Cross acceptance update. What happened with the cross acceptance bit? Sam,
Council adopted it.
Yeah. we
council adopted it and it went on?
I mean,
sent to the planner.
is this the final version that we got from Sam?
Yeah,
Right?
there we go.
We didn't change anything.
Yay,
What was
all right.
presented by the-
Good. So we did that. Check that off. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're done.
Vouchers.
I'll move that
We have-
we approve the vouchers.
I'll second the motion.
All right, that was John Doherty, seconded by Brad, and growled at by Dean. Everyone in favor of adopting the vouchers as presented? Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Moving on to correspondence, council representative report and other related items.
I would just say, come to the town hall meeting this Saturday. It starts at 10 a.m.
Maybe out of town again.
And, you know, it's, well, Brad could say more about it, but I think it's a good way for people to, you know, we're there to listen and engage with people and listen.
Do you explain the grants and when they start and the work?
Yeah,
all
we
that kind of good
usually
stuff?
go over the current grants. We're gonna go over the budget on
I
Saturday.
didn't see it.
And Actually, that's the big update I'll have for everyone, is the budget. We had, while revenues have increased with having Country Classic, we were splitting 50-50 with the school. The school's very happy with that. River Mills is a development in crisis. And River Mills hasn't paid taxes, the current owner of the development, in over a year. So it blew $100,000 shortfall in our budget this year. Because even if we don't collect, we still gotta pay the county, the local school and the regional school taxes. So we had to cover that $100,000 shortfall. In addition to that, health insurance premiums are up 17%.
So what are your options then?
So we've met several with the homeowners association. We learned the homeowners association has its own liens against the
Every individual
owner of the
property.
property.
Yeah, everyone.
We understand that now the homeowners association has also pulled off all lawn maintenance and snow removal on all sites owned by the current developer. So we're really concerned about maintenance of the property. Our attorney has reached out to the current owners. They said they don't think that the taxes that they get charged are fair, so they didn't pay them. He explained to them that's not how that works. They want to negotiate. You've got to, go through a process if you have a tax appeal. And we did have another developer reach out to us that expressed maybe some interest in buying the project. We try to connect them with the current principles that we understand are now the principles of the project. One of the things that's going to be a little more complicated is they divided up every parcel into its own LLC with different investors. So we have to figure that out.
So at what point does the borough take them to court and say, well, it's not $100,000?
Well, what we'll do is we're moving the tax sale to June.
Okay.
And we're gonna sell the liens against the properties, the tax note liens. And then whoever buys them, if they're over $1,500, they can get 18% interest. After 2 years, if they're not paid, they can initiate foreclosures against the lots. That's where we're at. But between health insurance, that, the affordable housing plan all in, the marketing, that's another 40,000. So before we even started anything, it's some big expenses this year. And so our ambitions of hiring another police officer, we're gonna hopefully backfill the third position. We've been doing interviews. We will not be able to afford a fourth. And there's really no extras in the budget. The only good thing is we're having more and more shared service with the local school and the high school and technology. I think that's gonna be a big help for us. And we're gonna maybe be sharing the purchasing agent with them as well.
On the town hall, which is I think wonderful.
And the Green Fair is also.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, that is there sort of cross marketing of Green Fair, town hall kind of?
I just got their ad, so I'm gonna push out my email list and say, hey, this is all going on Saturday.
Yeah,
These two things, please stop by.
Right.
Yeah,
The Green Fair's up at the field, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully the weather holds on.
Yeah, Saturday is not
That is not
promising.
looking too promising. But anyway, that's where we're at. We're trying to sell liens, but River Mills is, I would say it's in crisis at this point.
Yes. Anything else? If
I'll
not,
make a motion to adjourn.
I thought you might. Is there a second?
Yeah.
All in favor? All opposed? Thank you, everyone. We got a lot